Dobro jutro, spoštovani. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue in Slovene, you can follow the translation in English on channel 2. Pozdravljeni. Kaj nam govori številka 83 uradno registriranih lobistov, po neuradni oceni pa nekaj več kot 3500 aktivnih posameznikov, ki se imajo za lobiste v Sloveniji? Morda v napaki v sistemu in nujnosti ureditve področja, ki naj bi sogradilo enega izmed temeljev urejene in razvite demokracije? Poznavalci in uporabniki so poenoteni, da je skrajni čas, da bi se tudi v Sloveniji pohvalili strokovnim, transparentnim in etičnim delom na področju lobiranja, med javnim in zasebnim, kjer ni sive cone, kjer ni zlorab in kaznivih dejanj, kjer lobisti niso enako lumpi, temveč da se poklic lobista tako kot v najstarejših
but instead, like in old democracy, lobbying should be recognized as a profession that requires selection, education, quality criteria, and finally, certification and an official register. This is why we are here today, dear guests, because we would like to start somewhere. We know it is a process that takes time and very concrete changes. So welcome to the first conference of the Association for Legal Lobbying. It is going to be very active, and it will try to implement its vision to gradually professionalize lobbying, legal lobbying in Slovenia, following the example elsewhere in the world. The Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying is non-for-profit, non-political, national association of lobbyists that would like to make an active contribution to legalizing lobbying in Slovenia. The purpose is to legalize lobbying, to establish lobbying profession as a reputed profession, and we would also like to shape the good condition following the practice of the profession and fighting for excellence in lobbying, following moral and ethical standards. The association was established to improve the reputation of legal lobbying through presentation of good practices from abroad and nationally. We would also like to bring together registered legal lobbyists and other interested individuals. With its activities, it is trying to develop lobbying and enforce the code of ethics for lobbyists and make the profession more professional. So this conference will have two parts. We are going to hear from experts who will shed some light on practices, good practices abroad, practices that we as a developed democracy would like to follow. After the coffee break, we are going to have a round table, and hopefully we are going to have a very lively discussion. But of course, we need to mention a person who knows quite a lot about the topic. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Michael Ziegler, the president of the Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying. Mr. Igor Zorčič, Speaker of the Slovenian Parliament, our host, Alojz Kovšca, President of the National Council, distinguished President of the Corruption Prevention Commission, councillors, MPs, speakers, and guests. Dear members of the media, guests following this event online, in Slovenia and internationally. It is a great honor for me to have the opportunity here in the home of democracy to speak to you and address you as the co-organizer of this event, representing the Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying. I am very pleased to see that one of our first events is organized here in the Parliament, in the National Assembly, that plays a very important role when it comes to the adoption of legislation. National Council plays a very important role with its commissions, it adopts binding opinions, and therefore is a very important link in adopting the legislation. It brings together representatives of trade unions, farmers, the civil society, and everybody else who wants to express their legitimate opinions. It is a great honor for me to be able to address both chambers of our parliament, the National Assembly and the National Council. The Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying was established in September 2020 as a result of the need to regulate the status of lobbyists who perform their activity based on the Integrity and Prevention on Corruption Act. It is very important that we should have a register of legal lobbyists. We have set the basis for legal activity of lobbyists, and also we now have a toolbox in order to prevent corruption. In this way, we have set up a register of lobbyists, thus making a clear distinction between legal lobbying and corruption. All persons who would like to have an impact on adoption of the legislation, persons who have not committed any criminal offense, persons who meet all criteria can be entered in the register. However, we have seen that with our legislation, the last one adopted in 2011, some exceptions have been adopted. And persons who lobby for their own interests don't have to be entered in the register. There are many issues that we are going to have to address. The Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying was established to promote legal lobbying, to support transparency and professionalism of legal lobbyists, and also to raise the awareness of the public. Therefore, our association brings together legal lobbyists domestically and internationally. The first goal is self-regulation and code of ethics and moral principles in line with the Integrity and Prevention on Corruption Act. Before our association was established, there have been professionals in the profession. However, very often we have seen that lobbyists have been associated with corruption, and therefore there was quite negative reporting on the lobbying. This has had a very bad impact on the profession. We can say very clearly that maybe for some politicians it has even been good that there was chaos in the field of lobbying. To be a lobbyist is something you can be proud of in Western democracy, but in Slovenia, you know that sometimes lobbyists are seen in a very negative light. Some people will say when a legislation is adopted, well, this is the result of lobbying. Sometimes lobbying is seen more as a cosmetic thing. Today, financial institutions, lawyers, NGOs, foreign lobbyists, religious institutions are not entered in the register of lobbyists, even though they should be part of the register. Lobbying is a completely legal and normal process, and the profession, if it takes into account transparency and integrity, should be a reputed profession. Like John Fitzgerald Kennedy said in 1956, lobbyists are those experts who are capable of understanding and exploring difficult cases in a simple language. They worked with congressmen to present to them the positions they are defending. And lobbyists defending commercial, economic, and other interests in the country have a very important role to play in the legislative process. In the Slovenian Association for Legal Lobbying, we are fully aware of the role of lobbyists. We would like to spread good practice, raise the awareness in Slovenia about the importance of legal lobbying as part of the democratic process. For this purpose, we are going to offer education and training programs so that lobbying is viewed as a legitimate profession. We would also like to improve our legislation, improve the transparency. We would like to facilitate access to holders of public functions, and so on and so forth. We would like to follow other democracies, and we would like to have some space in both chambers of this parliament. All attempts of illegal lobbying should be detected and done away with. Lobbyists have always been present, and they will always be there. It would be an illusion to expect that corporations, craftsmen, and everybody else who have a legitimate interest to lobbying, it would be an illusion to expect that they are not going to try and influence holders of public interest at all levels. The interest of lobbyists is quite clear, to represent the interest of all those who have an interest to have an impact on the positive legislation. Therefore, not just politicians, but all of us, all citizens, have a task to make sure that we live in a society where everybody has the right to represent their interests. We are saddened that in Brussels there are hardly any Slovenian lobbyists. The smaller a country, the stronger it should be represented. We often hear some people saying that Slovenia has an excellent Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act, but that's a wrong perception. You should just have a look at the number of lobbyists in Brussels. There are regions that are better represented than Slovenia. Slovenia, however, because of our approach and the media reporting, we have seen that Slovenia is at the very bottom when it comes to representation in Brussels. This means that we have no opportunity to have an impact when it comes to adoption of EU legislation. So this conference is very important. We are going to hear about good and bad practices from other countries, and we would like to show how important lobbying is in Western democracies. In this way, we would like to overcome any doubts about the importance of legal lobbying. Today, we are hosting experts from many countries, and I hope that at the end of the day, we will all agree how important it is to have good legislation on lobbying. Thank you very much.
Ja, danes smo gostje v prav posebnem okolju.
Yes, today we are at a very special place in the Slovenian Parliament where laws are drafted and adopted. It's a great honor for us to be hosted also by the President of the National Council of the Republic of Slovenia, Aljaž Kovšca, and I will now give him the floor.
Spoštovani gospe in gospodje, cenjeni predsednik Državnega zbora, gospod Igor Zorčič, cenjeni predsednik Združenja za zakonito lobiranje Slovenije, gospod Mihael Cigler, spoštovani cenjeni predsednik Komisije za preprečevanje korupcije, gospod Robert Šumi, spoštovani kolegi državni svetniki, poslanci, cenjeni ugledni domači in razpravljavci, spoštovano občinstvo v dvorani in nadaljavo.
and everyone who's listening here and from abroad. Allow me to welcome you all in this hall of the Slovenian National Council. Today we will focus our attention on the conflict of interest. We will set clear rules for the game that we very shyly refer to as lobbying, and we will touch upon the urgency of professionalizing legal lobbying, because politicians and office holders are often put in a very unfavorable position due to the current situation, and the media preys on us. So setting clear boundaries for lobbying is urgent. After 30 years of independence, we need to finally take a step further. We have an act on lobbying in Slovenia, that is the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act. As we put it in the invitation, lobbying is an integral part of public participation, but to change the public image that is very reserved when it comes to lobbying and has a very negative image, we need a process that will include all the relevant stakeholders. Lobbying as a notion first arose in the USA, but the process of impacting decision makers has been around for centuries. Due to the historic circumstances, Slovenia is quite specific in this respect. We will do our best to move things along today with the help of experts that will hopefully make our future decisions easier for us. It's a fact that we can hardly speak about economic and political diplomacy today without mentioning lobbying. So we need to break with our history, otherwise we will never be able to optimize our democratic processes, which are all aimed at furthering public good. The importance of institutions and high moral standards is proven both by the aspirations and the criticism of the National Council when it comes to the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to use this opportunity to be here today to describe some of the difficulties we are experiencing due to insufficient legislation in this field. The National Council supports the Corruption Prevention Commission and is aware of its importance as an independent institution. And one of the fields that it covers in its activities is also lobbying. Our Council emphasizes that the Commission has to be independent, well-financed, has to implement preventive and other activities in this field. That's all fine. And the National Council is currently drafting a new integrity plan. In this plan, we want to limit all the risks faced by national councillors and the National Council. In our debate on recommendations, our councillors tackled a number of issues when it comes to certain deficiencies of the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act. They welcomed the intention of the Commission to advise the National Council when it comes to limiting corruption risks, and they also supported all efforts for improving the ethical code and the rules of procedure of the National Council. However, it was stressed a number of times that the opaqueness and lack of clarity in the Commission's recommendations is an issue. That is why the National Council believes it's impossible to fully implement these recommendations without limiting the work of the National Councillors. We have emphasized the role of National Councillors as representatives of regional and sectoral interests. So they are, in a sense, national lobbyists, and their main task is to advocate interests. So the lack of clarity of the legislation is putting national councillors in a very unfavorable position. It's difficult for us to know where our limits lie and who we may or may not meet in what way, and which contacts need to be reported as lobbying contacts. So what is lobbying, and how far does it go? Who is a lobbyist? Who can become one? At the 46th session of the National Council, we therefore adopted the initiative to launch an amendment of several articles of the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act. This request has been submitted to the Constitutional Court. This request was made because the provisions regulating the conflict of interest are in contravention of the Slovenian Constitution in our view. This act contains not very well-defined legal notions, and we therefore the law therefore allows the Corruption Prevention Commission to act quite unclearly. This can often result in the conflict of interest, and this is something that should be very clearly defined in the legislation. There are no definition as to the types, the duration, the nature of contacts that need to be reported as lobbying contacts. So basically, any contact can be reported as an illegal one. We also need a more detailed definition as to what applies to various types of persons. On the one hand, we have holders of public office that are subject to a certain hierarchy, but the same does not apply to national councillors, for example. National councillors, as such, will always maintain personal, political, and other types of contracts with interest groups, because that is the nature of his or her work. So not having this contact would make it impossible for the councillor to do their work. However, the existing act allows the Corruption Prevention Commission to intervene with the councillor's activities. Any decisions on whether or not someone should refrain from adopting certain decisions should be made by the councillors themselves. And in line with the legislation, councillors are obliged to inform the President of the National Council about any conflict of interest. And as a result, the councillor in question should refrain from any activities relating to this specific issue. I can put it very clearly. I, as a representative of craftsmen, would therefore not be able to participate in any debate on the legislation that in any shape or form deals with the status of craftsmen. But I was elected to represent the interests of craftsmen, but if I were to act in line with the legislation, I would have to inform the President about my conflict of interest, and the National Council would then have to vote on whether or not I would be able to participate in the debate. The rules of procedure of the National Council stipulate that the national councillors have a duty to participate in the sessions and working bodies of the National Council. So this current situation definitely impacts my activities and the activities of national councillors. I'm sorry for being so long in my introduction, but I wanted to be quite clear in illustrating the current state of affairs due to the existing legislation. There is a lot of uncertainty, and there's also a lot of room for maneuver when it comes to abuse and arbitrary decisions. So once again, I apologize, but I wanted to make sure that those who are responsible for the highest standards of communication and those who are involved in the scrutiny of democratic procedures have an insight in what is happening and consider what can be done to improve the situation. The issue of defining public interest is a very multifaceted one. I am convinced that public interest group that national councillors represent and that lobbyists also represent are an important actor of civil society and democracy, and as such need to be handled differently, particularly in this field. A redefinition of lobbying and the role of lobbyists and other players in public relations is something that is crucial to ensure that we have a good hygiene when it comes to the cooperation between everyone involved. At this point in time, the demarcation between interest groups, advocates, and decision makers are very unclear. We have a huge gray area here, so everyone can see things as best fits them. So I hope that today's event will pave the way to finding some new solutions for this problem, because it appears that among all EU member states, Slovenia has the biggest problem here because we are definitely lagging behind. I wish you all successful deliberations today, and I'm convinced that this is the first step in a process that will lead to more transparent rules of impacting decision makers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Košca, for your contribution, and obviously we still have quite a lot of work to do in the future. Now, in this house we have the National Assembly and the National Council, so we now would like to hear from Mr. Igor Zorčić, who is the Speaker of the Parliament.
Spoštovani predsednik državnega sveta, gospod Aleš Košca, spoštovani predsednik Združenja za zakonito lobiranje Slovenije, gospod
Michael Ziegler, President of the Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying, ladies and gentlemen.
Politiki velikokrat slišimo, da politika ne posluša in ne sliši državljank in državljanov.
Politics does not listen and hear the citizens. Sometimes we have people, we have the protesters, even in front of this building, and then you have people who come knocking on our door. So we often ask ourselves, who should we listen to and who should we not listen to? But the answer is very clear. We should listen to everybody. When working on legislative proposals, we need to hear all arguments, be it from big or small interest group. Everybody should have the same opportunity to present their arguments. But then, of course, as elected representatives, we should have the ability to make the right decision. But having said that, lobbying is
morda ni samo
demonized
lobiranje,
in
tudi pojem
Slovenia.
stranka bi rekel, da je
Maybe
že
not just
nekoliko
lobbying,
demoniziran, da se ga
even the word party,
nekatere
political
politične
party,
stranke pravzaprav
is
celo
somewhat
ogibajo,
demonized,
ampak,
and some political
vendarle
parties are even
gre
trying
za
to avoid the
temo,
word.
ki
However,
zaradi transparentnosti
we
in
are
zakonodajne
talking
sledi
about
potrebuje
a topic
široko
that
javno
requires
razpravo in
a
prepričan sem,
very
da tudi sprejme.
broad public discussion, and
OECD
as I'm
pravi,
convinced,
lobiranje
major
je lahko
changes.
pozitivno
OECD
gonilo demokracije,
says that
a obenem se
lobbying
odrazi
can
tudi
be a
kot možen
positive driving force for
mehanizem vplivanja
democracy.
interesnih skupin
However,
na
it's
oblikovanje
also a
zakonodaje in
mechanism
pravil
of
na račun
impacting
javnega interesa.
legislation at the expense of
Torej,
public interest.
gre za na eni strani dilemo,
So on the one hand,
na kakšen
we
način
have this dilemma
zakonodajno
in what
sled oziroma
way
začetek zakonodajnega postopka usmeriti in ga
the
narediti
legislative
transparentnega,
proposal can
da
be
vendarle
directed and made
šla tista
transparent
izvorna ideja na račun javnega interesa,
so that
ampak v korist javnega
we are
interesa.
going to work for
OECD je leta
the public
2010
interest
izdala
and not against
priporočila,
it.
ki so pomenila prvi
The
mednarodni
OECD
standard
has
pri
issued
naslavljanju področja
recommendations which
transparentnosti,
represented the
integritete
first
in
public
tveganj povezanih z
standards
lobiranjem.
on
Slovenija je bila leta
lobbying-related
2010 ena
integrity.
izmed
In
prvih držav
2010,
OECD,
Slovenia was
ki je
among the
področje
first
lobiranja zakonsko
OECD
tudi
countries
uredila z Zakonom o
to
integriteti in
regulate
preprečevanju
lobbying
korupcije,
through the
ki je
Integrity and
določil
Prevention
minimalne
of Corruption Act,
standarde
setting
transparentnosti in nadzora nad
minimum
lobistično dejavnostjo.
transparency and scrutiny standards
Ocenjujem,
for
da bi-
lobbying.
Če
I
bi se
believe
ta tema, to področje
it
urejalo v
would be
kakšnem drugem
much better
specialnem
if
zakonu.
this topic
Namreč
was
že ime
governed
zakona,
by
Zakon o
specialized
integriteti
act,
in
because
preprečevanju
the very
korupcije daje vtis,
title
da,
of the act
za-
governing
da obsega
lobbying,
stvari, ki so
Integrity
sicer
and Prevention of
koruptivne, in
Corruption
če,
Act, gives
lobiranje
you
postavimo
an
v
idea
takšen zakon, je skoraj
that
skoraj
lobbying can
podobno
be
kot bi ga v
associating
kazenski
with
zakon.
corruption. So
Verjamem, da
I could compare
tudi to morda
regulating
na neki
lobbying in
podzavestni
Criminal
ravni
Offences
daje
Act,
nekakšen
and maybe
negativen predzvok
unconsciously
samemu
lobbying
lobiranju,
gets
čeprav je to pravzaprav
a
tisto,
negative connotation
kar je
because of the very
nek
fact
osnoven
how it is
garant
governed in our
transparentnosti,
legislation.
In zagotavljanja zakonodajne sledi. Zato pozdravljam današnji
I therefore
posvet o
welcome this conference
profesionalizaciji
today on
ne glede na to,
professionalization of legal
ali
lobbying.
govorimo o registriranem lobiranju ali
Regardless
nepoklicnih
of
lobistih,
whether we are
tudi to
talking
področje
about
je verjetno
lobbying
potrebno
registered or
določneje
non-professional
urediti.
lobbyists. In any case,
Če
we have
te zadeve ne
to
bodo
adopt
bolj eksaktne,
good legislation.
se bo
Without
kaj hitro
detailed
lahko
legislation,
dogajalo in se
we can
verjetno tudi že dogaja,
end up in a
da
situation,
bomo
and probably
priča
this is already happening,
ali pa da smo priča različnim
we
neetičnim,
end up in a situation where there is also a lot of illegal, unethical approaches and attempts to impact decision making, including corruption.
da še tako dobra
You will
ureditev
probably all
v
agree
kakršnemkoli zakonu, kakorkoli naj se
that
imenuje,
no legislation,
pomeni
regardless of what you
ureditve
call
zadeve
the
oziroma
act,
upoštevanja tega
no
zakona,
legislation
ki
is
zadevo
a
ureja.
guarantee for its
Ključno je
enforcement.
doseči, in to
Therefore,
govorim na ravni družbe, ne samo
I think
odločevalcev,
it is very important, not just at the level of decision makers, but at the level of the society as a whole. It
Ali
is
pa, če
crucial
želite,
that we have a good understanding of lobbying.
poskrbeti je potrebno, da lobiranje
So we need to
postane
make
vrednota,
sure that
ne pa,
lobbying will be a
beseda,
virtue,
ki jo
a
pogosto
value,
tudi v zakonodajnih postopkih uporabljamo
and not a
za zmerjanje
word
tistih, ki predlagajo
that
zakon,
some
ki so ga
people use
povsem legitimno
with a very
predlagale
negative
takšne ali
connotation to
druge
address
interesne
people
skupine.
who are proposing legislation,
Po
even
svoji
though
naravi
that's completely
je torej
legal.
lobiranje glede na to, da želimo prisluhniti državljankam in
And
državljanom,
because we would like to
interesnim
listen
skupinam
to our
nepogrešljivo,
citizens and
in
various interest
naša
groups,
odgovornost je,
lobbying
da
is
ga
indispensable,
uredimo
legal lobbying is
in
indispensable.
da
So
pri
it is in
sprejemanju
our
zakonodaje,
interest that we
kjer je
should regulate
pravzaprav,
it.
ki je samo vrh ledene gore plasiranja vseh argumentov,
adopting
da
legislation
dosežemo
is only
to,
the
da
tip
bo
of
lahko
the
na koncu
iceberg.
vsak državljan
But it is the
za vsak
first
zakon
step
vedel
so
točno,
that
zakaj
at the
je bil
end of the
sprejet
day,
in kakšne
every
bodo
citizen will
posledice
know
bodi
why a
zanj,
particular
bodisi za
piece of
tistega,
legislation was
ki je
adopted
zakon
and
predlagal.
what the results would be for
Naj
him or
postrežem
her
za nekaj
and
podatki.
those who have
Leta
proposed the
2019
legislation. In
so
2019,
poslanske skupine Komisije za preprečevanje korupcije
the
prijavile
Corruption
približno
Prevention
četrtino
Commission
oziroma 1222
received
lobističnih stikov od 4982 vseh
1,200
prijavljenih strani funkcionarjev
lobbying
in javnih
contacts,
uslužbencev,
which is 25%
pri
of
čemer
all
je
contacts.
KPK po pregledu in opravljeni analizi
The
ugotovila,
Commission
da v
for
skoraj
the Prevention of
polovici primerov
Corruption
ni šlo za
found
lobiranje,
out that in
temveč
half
zgolj
of reporting
za
cases,
pridobivanje
it
določenih
was not
pojasnil,
about lobbying, it
informacij
was just about
ter za druge
obtaining
dovoljene oblike
information
javnega in
and
nejavnega
other
vplivanja na odločitve.
allowed forms of
Iz tega
impacting
podatka veje zmerni
decisions.
optimizem o
Therefore,
ozaveščenosti in
I
odgovornem
am
ravnanju
moderate
funkcionarjev in javnih
optimist
uslužbencev,
about
ampak
the
vendarle
activity
prepričan sem, da bo
of
tudi
holders
današnja
of public
razprava
office, but I'm
ponudila
convinced that
veliko
the debate today
odgovorov,
is badly
kako
needed and
to
hopefully
ozaveščenost
we will
in
get
nenazadnje
more
tudi
answers
normativni
about
okvir še
how to
izboljšati
improve our
in
legislation, but
dvigniti
also
na
how
višjo
to raise
raven,
the awareness
primerljivo tudi z
to a higher level,
državami, v
comparable
katerih
to
lobiranje obstaja že
countries
vrsto let.
where lobbying has been present for a
Ni
number
odveč
of years.
omeniti, da k ureditvi tega področja
It is worth mentioning
to tudi počno, prispevajo tudi nevladne
that
organizacije.
NGOs
Naj omenim
also have
Transparency
an
International
important role to
Slovenia.
play. May I mention
Primer teh
Transparency
prizadevanj je
International
nedvomno tudi
Slovenia?
v juniju 2020
An example
vzpostavljena spletna
of
stran
these
Varuh
activities
integritete,
is
s pomočjo
also
katere
the
lahko javno spremlja
Integrity
lobistične stike vlade in
Ombudsman
parlamenta ter
website,
omejitve
where
poslovanja zaradi
we
zasebnih
can
interesov
read about all
funkcionarjev.
the contacts and activities of holders of public
Tako
offices.
da prepričan sem, da
So I'm
ne glede na
convinced
to, da se ta materija zakonja in da je urejena primarno v zakonu,
that
da lahko tudi
regardless
ta
of the fact
nevladni
that
del
we have
močno prispeva k temu,
the legislation,
da se
which is of utmost
zakonodaja
importance,
na eni strani
NGOs too have
pravilno
a very
bere,
important role to
pravilno in
play
enako in na drugi
in
strani,
interpreting the
se lahko tudi
legislation,
na ta način prispeva k
and NGOs
ozaveščenosti
can
vseh
also
tistih, ki
help
zakonodajo
raise
naslavljajo.
the awareness of
Spoštovani
all
gospe in
those
gospodje,
that are
naj
concerned by the
torej misli
legislation.
strnem v
Ladies and
zaključek, da mora
gentlemen,
biti
to
vplivanje na
conclude,
proces odločanja v
influencing
imenu splošnih
decision
koristi
making
ali koristi posameznih
should
skupin
work
ljudi,
for
kar je sicer
the public
temeljni namen
good and the
lobiranja,
interest
zakonito,
of
legitimno in
groups
etično
concerned,
dejanje
but
oziroma
it should
proces,
always be
pri čemer ni
legal
nujno, da gre
and
le za
lawful.
spoštovanje zakonskih določb,
And I'm
temveč
not
tudi za
talking just
spoštovanje
about honoring
etičnih
the
in
legislation,
drugih standardov.
but also
Zato
respecting
menim, da
ethical
so
and moral standards.
prizadevanja za
I therefore
profesionalizacijo
believe that
zakonitega
efforts
lobiranja
to professionalize
predvsem
legal
v luči
lobbying
spoštovanja teh najvišjih standardov, ki obsegajo mnogo več
work
kot
in
samo
this
spoštovanje
direction,
zakonske
that
ureditve,
is not just
prava pot.
respecting the legislation, but
Zato
also
vam želim,
respecting
da tudi
ethical
z
and
današnjo
moral standards.
razpravo in potem
This is the right way to go.
nadaljnjimi,
I therefore
prispevate k temu, da se
wish
bo
you a fruitful
verjetno
conference
naslednjem
and
tudi
good
Državni
work
zbor
in the
kot,
years to come,
glavni
and
odločevalec,
hopefully the
odločil,
National Assembly
da spremeni
in its
tisto, kar je
next term of
potrebno spremeniti.
office is going to take the decision to change what needs to be changed. Thank you very much.
Tako uvodoma je bilo veliko povedanega.
So
Verjamem,
a
da smo
lot
se
has
dobro
been heard in
ujeli.
this introduction,
In sedaj
and I
bo šlo
believe we are
seveda še
now
bolj
all
zares.
warmed up
K
and we
mikrofonu
can
vabim
get to the
predsednika
point.
Združenja za zakonito
I
lobiranje
will now
Slovenije,
pass the
da
floor
napove
to the
naše
president
goste, strokovne
of
govorce.
the Slovenian Association for Legal Lobbying to announce our expert speakers.
Torej vabim naše cenjene goste, kot prvo
We will now pass the floor to our guests. The first speaker will be Mr. Robert Šumi, the president of the Corruption Prevention Commission. We will then hear from Dr. Denis Mancević, the director of Herman and Partners, Dr. Boris Cizel, the Vice President of the Slovenian Association for Legal Lobbying. We will hear from Philip Flamnik from Foreign Legal in Belgium, Markus Eder, the Austrian Public Affairs Association, Dominik Meyer, the Director of Miller and Meyer Consulting, Dominik Reber, a partner in Hilton Nefschnift Counselors from Switzerland, Peter Valvaren will speak about professional lobbying in the Netherlands. We will then have a video presentation by Daniel Geugen, who is a professor at the College of Europe and a renowned author from Belgium. And I will conclude this part with my presentation on legal lobbying, and this will be followed by a roundtable debate. I will now pass the floor to Dr. Robert Schumi. Please, you have the floor.
Spoštovani predsednik Državnega zbora,
Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Zorčič, Honorable President of the National Council, Honorable President of the Slovenian Association for Legal Lobbying, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests.
Verjetno na samem začetku
At the very beginning,
moj nastop terja svojevrsten naziv na izvajanje predsednika Državnega sveta.
I need to respond to what has been said by the President of the National Council. There's always a different side of the medal. We are implementing the law, and we are committed to fostering transparency and the rule of law. If our initiatives in this field that definitely pursue the best intention have some unwanted consequences, I regret that, but all of our findings, should someone disagree with them, can be appealed. There are institutes for that, and if I conclude my response, the final report will be drafted by the Constitutional Court, and that will be the end of it. Now, briefly, from my side, why does lobbying have the status it has in Slovenia, and what solutions can be found? I should mention that the Corruption Prevention Commission, as stated in its name, is a preventive organization whose task is to identify corruption risks, try to make office holders aware of these risks, try to reduce these risks, and to also contribute to transparency, the rule of law, fostering democracy, a better reputation of the institutions, and to better lobbying. Because integrity, responsibility, and democracy also entails lobbying. As has been mentioned by previous speakers, and I'm sure we will hear again, lobbying means that certain individuals have an impact on behalf of interest groups on certain authorities, be it local, regional, national authorities, or anyone who has the mandate to adopt certain decisions, and the decision maker can then accept or disregard any proposals. And this obviously can be done in a transparent way. And in this context, if this is done secretly, this is not necessarily always lobbying. And in 2010, the National Assembly decided, after 20 years of independence, that it's finally high time to have some formal regulation for the field of lobbying. The provisions are as they are. I can say that our commission, as you will see in the statistics, is quite reserved when it comes to the results. We do see certain deficiencies, but as I said, the numbers will speak for themselves. I think I can remove my masks. I apologize. I think you will hear me better. So improving transparency in itself when it comes to lobbying and improving the reputation of the profession is something that has to be done by both sides, both the lobbyists as well as the lobbied persons. And if a lobbyist were to report an unlawful act to our commission, that would also improve the reputation of the profession. So there's room for maneuver on both sides. Lobbyists are not allowed to be involved in lobbying outside of the limits of the law. They are also not allowed to use any wrongful information, offer any kind of gifts or services, or to put a holder of public office in a position that would result in a conflict of interest. But all of these things that are not allowed and that are prescribed by the law are not always implemented in practice. Now, if we look at the statistics, we have 85 lobbyists registered in our register. I think the current situation stands at 80. For 2021, we have 1,088 records of lobbying contacts, and these registrations pertain to 4,526 contacts. What is worrying here is particularly what we see at the local level. At municipality level, we only have 5 records of lobbying contacts reported by 5 municipalities in 2021. In 2020, we also only received reports from 5 municipalities out of over 200. And as you can see, the reports filed by registered lobbyists in 2021, there were 40. And this is also a clear indication of the lack of information provided to our commission by lobbyists themselves. There weren't any stringent procedures in 2021, but these statistics show that even though it's been 12 years since the Act was adopted, this law has not come into life, so there is room for maneuver, and we do need changes and amendments. So why does this regulation not work in practice? Why has it not resulted in improving the reputation of lobbying? Because the legal provisions are not being implemented, and because there is a huge gap between the normative rules and what is happening in practice. Our law is often highlighted as an example of good practice, but that may be the case for the legislation, not so much for its implementation. So what is happening? Lobbying contacts are not being reported, neither by the lobbied persons nor by the lobbyists. And this has certain repercussions. Media often report on contacts that were not reported to our commission, and that pertain to contacts between decision makers at the highest level and influential representatives of the private sector. So when two people meet, when it's two people who know one another, that's not a problem. The problem occurs when things become intransparent, when a shadow of a doubt arises, and that often results in the loss of trust in the public, and that is how this negative image of lobbying in the public eyes comes about. This has been happening for years and has only deteriorated in the current situation. We are currently facing very little trust in public institutions as a whole at this point in time. So how can we change things around? A reputable lobbyist, a trustworthy lobbyist, is a lobbyist with a high level of integrity who acts professionally. That means that this lobbyist acts in line with the applicable legislation, and lobbyists who always report all the required information in the prescribed manner, in the prescribed time, and someone who will also report any illegal actions by other either lobbyists or lobbied persons. And obviously, if a lobbyist wants to be a professional, they will need a high level of integrity. And unfortunately, in Slovenian society today, that is not what is the standard. So that is how things should be, and unfortunately that's not what we see in practice, because integrity is viewed as something that is not a run-of-the-mill. We have the situation we have had for years, and the lack of trust is a result of low integrity, and low integrity results in mistrust. That was a brief summary of our views and our initiatives in this sphere. Thank you.
Najlepša hvala. In besedi vabim dr. Denica Manceviča, direktorja Herman & Partnerji, ki bo predstavil izzive in slabe prakse lobiranja v Sloveniji.
Spoštovani,
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to give my presentation. I'll try to be as exact and illustrative as possible in talking about challenges and poor lobbying practices in Slovenia. Of course, the goal is to regulate this area in a much better way, as has been mentioned several times. Now, some of the things that I have prepared in my presentations have already been mentioned by the previous speaker, so my first point comes as nothing new. Among key challenges, I see three major ones. The first one is the scope of lobbying. There is a discrepancy between what is reported and what is happening on the ground. I wrote 99%, it's not an exact number, but what I'm trying to say is that most lobbying remains in a gray zone. And the further you go to the local level, the more you will see unreporting lobbying. So it's not all about the legislative proposals and lobbying at the national level. We should talk about the local level as well. Local lobbying remains even more under the radar compared to the national level. Then my second point is criminalization of lobbying compared to legal and professional activity. I agree very much that we need a specific, a dedicated law. Lobbying should not be included in the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act because it unconsciously criminalizes lobbying. In exercising my profession, I work with journalists quite a lot. And I can tell you that the negative connotation among the public also reflects on journalists. Journalists also tend to report in a negative way on a completely legal activity. Just to give you an example, whenever adoption of legislation is mentioned, journalists will turn to the public use database called ERAR. However, if I tell you that 99% of all lobbying contacts are unreported, what will happen? Well, in that case, the reported legal contacts will be viewed as negative, and people who have reported their contacts will be reported on in a very negative way. How about the 99% of unreported contacts? And the third challenge that we have not heard about today is something that is also directly connected to lobbying. Maybe it's very difficult to govern it through the legislation. And I'm talking about the closing of the decision-making process. Maybe it's partly a result of the pure reputation and the negative connotation. We have seen that some officials are shutting down, are closing themselves against all legal and necessary contacts, which are a normal part of a democratic process. What will be the quality of the decision-making process without any contacts? And I can tell you, from my practice, we have had tens of legislative proposals adopted by officials in the legislative process without the officials allowing any contact. So, as a result of the negative connotation, of a negative reputation, we have seen negative selection. We have seen decision makers shutting their doors. And I have not seen enough public discussion and analysis, but I think it's a topic that is worth discussing. We urgently need some change, otherwise the door of decision makers will continue to be shut. And I'm not talking about this or that government, but as a result, the quality of decision making is deteriorating. And my next and last slide is about this topic. These are three examples of poor practices. The first one is on managing state-owned assets. In the past, some decisions have been taken and nobody can explain how and why they have been adopted. Managing state-owned assets is also about the classification of investments. For our foreign guests, may I say that our state-owned assets are classified as strategic or portfolio assets. And from my personal experience, I can tell you that I know some examples of how a particular group of assets has been classified as strategic or portfolio. And it's crazy, because sometimes the fate, the future of state-owned assets are left to personal decision and personal interest. Sometimes decisions are taken based on friendly contacts, but at the end of the day, it has an impact on the assets owned by the state and all of us. Assets are classified and categorized as either portfolio or strategic, and then you can see what happens with those assets. And I'm sure that nobody in certain cases can explain why a particular asset has been categorized as strategic or portfolio. And there is nothing wrong with the classification, but we need some criteria, we need reasons why it has happened. Then, a second example of poor practice would be that recently we have seen significant interference with market relations without any previous consultation. Decisions are taken that distort market conditions, and that's extremely dangerous. For the time being, we live in a capitalist system, and market has an important role to play. However, decisions are being taken that restrict market access for certain companies. And I know of a case, just imagine, you own a business and you have been in business for 20 years. You are working legally, but then the government decides to change the status of your business. That's legitimate, but media have reported that there have been meetings behind closed doors with representatives of a particular business, and nobody knows of that contact, meaning that a certain business will not be allowed to exercise their activity anymore. Maybe it's a small company, maybe it has not been reported on in the public, but it points to a very dangerous direction, and it could end up in a spiral where market situation will be based on political decisions that are not reported anywhere, where the decision-making process is completely non-transparent. And the third example of poor practices in Slovenia is something that has already been mentioned today. At the end of the day, the Constitutional Court has the final say in any disputes. I would like to speak from my experience, and it's not so simple. If decisions taken are of poor quality, if arguments don't have a place, if examples of good practice don't have a place in decision-making, and I could go on and on. Sometimes decisions are taken as if Slovenia had all the knowledge, all the know-how, and all the technology of this world. But we don't. In some areas, Slovenia is a very advanced country, but in some areas, we are not so advanced and we don't have enough resources. So it would be wise to listen to others, to our strategic partners, the EU, Germany, other countries. But no, we can see decision makers shutting their door, and there is no opportunity for presenting good arguments, and decisions are taken which have nothing to do with reality, decisions that are not professionally justified. And again, we see arbitrary decisions, and we see an invasion of personal interest, and also, if you will, party interest. And therefore, we have seen a big number of cases that end up in the Constitutional Court. And one might say, well, the system works then. I agree as a citizen, but as a representative of businesses, I would say that's not good, because even during this process, damage is caused, and this damage is measurable. There are several indicators to measure the damage done. I hope I have not scared you off. I just wanted to illustrate how things are happening in real life. And I think that your efforts and the efforts of the Corruption Prevention Commission are a step in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Najlepša hvala. V prezentaciji vabim dr. Borisa
Thank you
Cizla,
very much.
podpredsednika
I would
Združenja
now like to
zakonito
pass the
lobiranja
floor
Slovenije.
to Dr. Boris Cizl, Vice President of the Slovenian
Spoštovani,
Association for Legal Lobbying.
Veselje,
Ladies and
vam
gentlemen,
lahko povem, da sem
I'm
eden
glad
tistih redkih, ki v Sloveniji
that
predavamo o lobiranju.
I am one of the few
Oba
people in
fakulteta
Slovenia who
imate-
actually
imate kot svoj predmet.
has lectures on lobbying.
Na drugih
My
visokošolskih zavodih
faculty offers this
kakor je
as,
tudi sicer
as an
problem,
elective
da
subject.
skozi
Unfortunately,
izobraževalni
we are
proces
an exception
dan
in
danes
this context,
premalo
and unfortunately,
pripravimo mladino na komuniciranje.
the education
Komuniciranje pa
process in
bistveno
Slovenia does not
za
prepare
uspeh
young people for
delovanja
communication.
v družbi.
Even though communication is the foundation for success in society, more so today than ever before. So my wish would be to perhaps start
Pojmovno
by
poskušam
defining
da jih
a few basic
opredelim.
notions before we move on.
Vemo, kaj je lobiranje, torej vpliva
We know
na
what
plače,
lobbying is. It's impacting decision makers. And unfortunately, the definition in our law is wrong. It says that it is
brez
non-public
v raznih oblikah in se pravi tudi lobiranja.
activity, and that is not the
Imamo
case.
različne oblike v
We
modernih
have
družbah.
various types of lobbying in current society. We have think tanks, we have interest groups, pressure groups, who all are engaged in different types of lobbying. But what is crucial is that this lobbying is legal,
Krši kakršenkoli zakon,
so
korupcija je seveda
fully
pač
in
klasičen
line
primer
with the applicable legislation, that it is legitimate, which means that all requirements of ethical codes and codes of conduct are respected, because those clearly define what is not allowed. And our speaker today, Professor Gagan from Brussels, was exited as a member one of the lobbying associations out of protest because they were not adhering to their code of conduct. So what is ethical lobbying? It's quite simple. Ethical lobbying is lobbying that does not harm the common interest. That's very simple. In the contemporary democratic society, any decision-making involves a number of stakeholders, a number of actors, and lobbyists are only one of those various players. And if they disregard other players and the legitimate interests of other players, then they will start off on the wrong foot. What is the abuse of lobbying? That would mean that a lobbyist acts against their own ethical code or code of conduct, that they act against the public interest, and worst case scenario, that a lobbyist acts in contravention of the legislation. And I have to admit that even though I've been active in this field for years, I still don't have a final answer to the question why lobbying is so demonized. I know a number of reasons, and they have all been stated here, so I'll not repeat them, but it's like saying there are many doctors who have committed serious errors, and people have died as a result. Obviously, doctors do their best not to let everyone know, but still it doesn't occur to anyone to say all doctors are bad. And the same goes for lobbyists. So saying all lobbyists are crooks is simply unfair to those who are very professional. But obviously, lobbyists also need to be professionals to be effective in their work. Speaking about the reasons for the negative image, in Slovenia, when it comes to our ranking among 180 states in terms of the perception of corruption. So that's the public perception as to how many corrupted acts occur. We unfortunately dropped from the 34th to the 41st place between 2015 and 2021. So we have made a step back. Unfortunately, most people in Slovenia know that a lot of corruption is there, but nevertheless, we cannot oversimplify things. Why does lobbying take place? Because it is legitimate and fair that everyone be able to advocate their interests. What is important is how this is done, and that this is done in a manner that does not cause harm to other parties. I cannot imagine a society where lobbying would not be allowed. There are a few states in the world where, according to the law, lobbying is prohibited, but obviously it is still there. It only is done even more secretly than in other places. So, as I mentioned in my introduction, it is of key importance that young people come across lobbying in their education, that they come to understand this activity without prejudice. And it is definitely one of the tasks of our association to ensure that we have more education and training in this field, not only for professional lobbyists, because what I wanted to emphasize was also that professional lobbyists are responsible for only about 5% of all lobbying activities. But we need to have a comprehensive approach if we want to see advances in this field. We offer various types of educations and trainings, longer, shorter seminars, and hopefully this will make a difference and will result in lobbying being carried out at a higher level, and that it will also result in a better public image. Here you see the so-called inverted impact pyramid, but obviously impacting decision makers occurs before we enter any of these steps. Any type of communication always entails an element of impacting. Today, lobbying is also an academic discipline because it fulfills all the three basic conditions. There is a wide scope of professional literature dealing with lobbying. There are thousands of articles on the subject. There are various associations in this field, and in many Western democracies, lobbying is also an academic subject. Speaking about networks and lobbying groups, we need to differentiate between two categories. On the one hand, we have those that advocate a broader public interest. For example, the European Association of Chambers. And there are also those that advocate corporate interests, such as bank associations, industry associations. Here you see a chart showing the number of registered lobbyists in Brussels over the last 20 years. You can see that the number has increased tenfold. And we are registering the highest growth level among NGOs who really have grown immensely, and it's only right that that has taken place, because they definitely do have a role to play in advocating their interests when it comes to decision makers. So what are the criteria for high-quality lobbying communication? First and foremost, we have the sound argument. This has not changed through the centuries, because lobbyists have been around for centuries, and in the past what was crucial was that the lobbyist had a good reputation and that people trusted this person. That was the only qualification needed for someone to become a lobbyist. Secondly, there's the style of presentation. Obviously, the lobbyist has to be good in rhetorics and has to be able to adapt to their audience. And thirdly, there's also the legitimacy, which is very important. Here you see a quote by David Cameron, former British Prime Minister. As you know, there's a long tradition of lobbying in UK, and in this quote he spoke about the secret corporate lobbying that is not in line with the legislation, and unfortunately that is the type of lobbying that most people in the public associate with the term as such. And hopefully in Slovenia we will also reach a point where people will say enough, we need to regulate this field. There are many types of lobbying. I will not burden you with all this, but there's direct and indirect lobbying, and in indirect lobbying it's even more important to know who is behind the positions and the arguments. And also in direct lobbying it's crucial that the lobbyists identify themselves and be very transparent in that respect. A survey was conducted in Slovenia, and the results show that most office holders in Slovenia are open to lobbying contacts. However, most of them perceive lobbying as rarely or very rarely having an impact on the adopted decisions. Sometimes surveys don't give the best, are not the most reflective of the actual situation. This is a slide that can be attributed to our guest today, Professor Gagin, and these are the basic strategies adopted by lobbyists in trying to convince their interlocutors. On the one hand, there's the negative strategy, the defensive strategy, the anticipative strategy, the reactive strategy, and the proactive one, which is obviously the best, because this means that the lobbyist comes forward with a good proposal, a sound proposal that is likely to be adopted. Here you see a list of the competences and qualities of good lobbyists. So there's contextual and emotional intelligence, good general knowledge, analytical capabilities, communication skills, and credibility. And obviously there's also the capacity to cooperate, because sometimes it's impossible to do everything alone. And dear ladies, men are often not fully aware of all the advantages women have when acting as lobbyists, and this is something I always mention to my students. It's not because women always seduce their male interlocutors. No, it's because women are so meticulous in their preparations and in their planning, because they are very goal-oriented. And one of the drawbacks, on the other hand, of women is that if a conflict arises, women are less likely to to resolve the situation. And however, it's also true that women are less likely to act in contravention with the law. I would like to conclude at this point, and I thank you all for your attention.
Najlepša hvala, Boris.
Thank you very much, Boris. And I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Philippe Fleming, Director of Farm League from Belgium.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is for me, coming from Brussels, a real pleasure to be able to speak in this place. And I look at it from the perspective that I have been working for, actually in the meantime, 40 years in Brussels as a European lawyer. So my angle is not the classic angle of a lobbyist. My angle is rather the angle of a European lawyer being busy with European regulatory issues, but also being busy with actually disputes that within the context of the European Union occur at different levels. Because when you talk about disputes at European level, you talk about administrative disputes. This means conflicts between companies, governments, and European authorities at the first level actually taking place with the European institutions like the Commission, and only at the second level actually going to court cases. So I'm not going to explain you why and how lobbying needs to be organized. My speech is rather about why do I strongly believe and why my practice over the last 40 years has proven that cooperating with lobbyists, legal, professional, registered lobbyists, is a big advantage in the European environment. And I strongly believe in what I'm saying, and I strongly believe that actually whatever is happening in Brussels, which is actually extremely complex and requires a very good understanding of the procedural issues, a very good understanding of the content, of the competence, requires indeed, that a variety of people with top-level knowledge cooperate with each other to come to the proper solutions. And coming to a proper solution, it's not something that is only benefiting the client that those people are serving, it's also contributing to a better society that we want to have. And therefore, I am a strong advocate for, indeed, legal, lobbyists, registered in a professional manner, in a transparent manner, at all levels of the Union. Why is Brussels important? Well, actually, I go back to the time that I was a student. Studying European law, I had the advantage that I was invited to go with my colleagues and with my professor to Strasbourg to a plenary session of the European Parliament. And at that time, I'm talking about the 1980s, Parliament's role was extremely limited. They could give opinions. The only power they had was actually to vote against the budget of the European communities at that time. That was the only real competence. Nevertheless, we could see that the Parliament's opinions were extremely relevant in the decision-making process. And that was the result of already at that time, I'm talking about 40 years ago, of at that time actually a consistent dialogue between the MEPs and between actually all the constituents around them, stakeholders, governments, private associations, private companies, representatives of European industries. Already at that time, that dialogue was actually present in the European Parliament. And therefore, the opinions that were issued by the European Parliament had a tremendous political impact on the decision-making, which at that time was actually limited to the Commission and the Council. So already as a student, I was convinced of the necessity of it. Just a few facts. If you talk about the Brussels today, you talk about big facts. You have 11,000 registered organizations, 80,000 staff. You have 20,000 registered public affairs consultants. There's a budget of 1 billion euros. And I think it's good that we know that, it's transparent, that we know that there are 5,000 diplomats. There are 1,000 accredited journalists. Very important in the dialogue as well.
There are 20 organizations of the EU. So it's not just about the Commission, the Parliament and the Council. There are a lot of other committees, organizations, not only in Brussels, Strasbourg and Luxembourg, spread around, even in Slovenia. You know, all these organizations are part of this very broad concept of the European Union that you need to address in a proper manner, in a professional manner. And what is also relevant, in Brussels you find 180 nationalities speaking 108 languages. And I would say it's not only speaking 108 languages, it's also the diversity of culture that you need to address in the same manner. This means the big principle that I really embrace of the European Union is indeed this question of unity in diversity. This means we need to understand the diversity if we want actually to come to common rules, to common understandings. And that requires actually a very active debate, not only between the politicians involved, but between the politicians and actually the community of stakeholders, being the businesses, being the civil society, all involved in that kind of debate. Another fact that I consider extremely relevant, certainly when we talk to national politicians, you need to be aware that 70% of the legislation that is applicable in your own country comes from Brussels. 70%. And we see a move even today that 70% is actually more and more shifting into a direction where the whole decision-making process is taking place in Brussels, no longer a combination between what is happening in Brussels and further implementation in member states. And I come back to that to explain it a little bit further. What does it mean? Whatever is happening, whether it is regulatory or disputed or technical, committees, think about European Chemical Agency, or think about, Customs Committee. Whatever is happening, you need to be there, and I think it was said by a speaker before me, you need to be there very early. If you think that coming to Brussels whenever the issue is already in the European Parliament, when they are talking about the regulation, well, I'm sorry to say, but you're too late. It doesn't mean that you cannot have any impact anymore, but actually you're already too late when you think that, you can wait until the Commission comes up with a proposal. Because the way that a proposal is even adopted is already subject to very strict procedural rules, impact assessment, etc., where it is relevant as a stakeholder to also show your interest, to explain your interest. Indeed, what has been said by a previous speaker, to be proactive in the way, come up not only with a reaction to it, come up with a proposal, come up with a solution to a problem actually that maybe some people have not even been thinking about, because I think sometimes it is important also for the institutions to understand what is living in the society and what they need to address in a proper manner. Second element that I believe of importance is actually using the right team. And I give here a variety. Everybody knows the main institutions, the Commission, the European Parliament, the Council of Ministers. Many of you also know how the European Court of Justice has a role to play, and it's a very important role, and I come back on that. Of course, we all talk about the Committee of the Regions and the Economic and Social Committee, but as I said earlier, there are a number of committees that are extremely important and that you need to be able to understand and address properly. And you cannot go to the European Chemical Agency if you do not have experts. You don't need to be a lawyer there. You need to be a chemical expert to explain what the customer wants actually from the chemical committee to be adopted. And we talk about active substances, we talk about biocidal product registrations. All of that is something where a number of member states experts gathering in that committee will actually listen, and you will be heard, will listen, but you require to have experts with you. It will not work by just saying, well, that's the rule of law. Say, thank you. You need to have experts. You need to have consultants that actually understand the issues. So that's why I always have been advocating for the fact that the way you address things requires a multidisciplinary approach. And by case, you need to decide how you compose that team. Are you only going to have public affairs consultants? Extremely important in this kind of debate. Extremely important when it comes actually to regulatory questions, but also important actually when it comes to certain even disputes. I think about trade disputes, I think about other issues where it is important. You lawyers like me can also play a very active role, because It's a matter of, creating the building blocks, the legal argumentation, understanding what the Court of Justice has been saying in a number of issues that can be relevant and that can be used proactively by the lobbyists when actually they want to construct something new. So I believe the strong cooperation, and myself, I have been cooperating with lobbyists for all those years. That's why I'm a strong supporter of, legal lobbying, because that kind of combination is something that can work. It can help actually the client, but can also contribute to a better society. Sometimes you need economic and financial advisors. I gave the example of trade disputes. I was involved in actually WTO cases, and at the end of the day, you talk about retaliation, where you need to calculate what actually the level of retaliation you want to demand. And it's a very important aspect, it's not a lobbyist that will do that, it's not a lawyer who will do that, it's actually somebody who understands the economics and the financials, who can actually come up with an opinion that can be used both by the lobbyists and by the lawyers actually to do that. And of course, it has been said already, nothing is happening when you do not understand the way that communication is occurring. Media and communication are very important and actually, in my view, intimately connected to the activities of public affairs consultants. And then I think, beside the team, you need to have the support. You need to understand that you're not there alone, but you need also to understand that you need to talk to a number of people. You need to have the 360-degree approach. Who else is involved? Who will be on your side? Who may be against you? What do you need to do? And in every issue, it depends a little bit, and that's where the diversity comes into the picture. I was busy at a certain moment of time with nano products, and there is a lot of discussion about nano products because the Scandinavian countries are very much against that, while actually more of the southern European countries in some areas like agriculture like the use of certain nano products, for some reason. So you need to understand, you cannot just go there, this is good. You need to have actually supporters, you need to have people who understand issues very well. The same with parliaments, industry associations and others. So use the right team is, in my view, one of the other things. What do you need to do? And I need to shorten a little bit, Mr. President. Well, there are a variety of things that you need to do. Of course, I say you need to start with monitoring everything that happens in a proactive way, but understanding what you actually see. And that requires also, top-level experts. A lobbyist is not only somebody who goes there and says, actually, I want this. A lobbyist is a highly trained professional who understands the scope of the issues that he is addressing. He understands the procedures, he understands the people, he understands the way that he needs to address that. So understanding the context is actually relevant. Engage proactively, think about litigation, and being present. Just coming back to, the regulatory environment, and I will close, although there are a lot of other slides, but I will close. And why I do this because I said it in the beginning. European law is composed of about treaties, chapters, also the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and secondary legislation. We have in the treaty foreseen directives, regulations, decision recommendations, and then very important, implementing and delegated acts. What we see today, and that's why the 70% rule is becoming so relevant, we see today that European authorities make a shift towards more regulations and less directives. Now, a directive is something that is binding the member states with the objectives, but allows national parliaments and states still to have actually diversity in implementation. That takes time, and that can lead to actually discrepancies. So we see now that European authorities walk away from that. And more we see, look at the whole digital policy, we see that they opt for regulations, meaning the Commission proposal goes to the European Parliament and the Council, it's subject to the co-decision procedure, the time frame is set, and it is directly applicable in your jurisdiction without any interference of your national parliament. And that means it becomes even more relevant to all of you to be implicated as the early bird from the time that it starts. Because you need even in your own parliament to have a debate, how do you want to look at it from a European perspective? How do you want your ministers to act in Brussels? So that shift is also important. Another shift we see is walking away from strict regulation to actually soft law. We've seen it in a number of areas. I saw it, for instance, in the whole dispute on shale gas, where actually first there was a draft, there was a feeling that it would never pass the institutions, so the Commission changed it into a recommendation. And then there is a debate, what does it mean? And I mention here a case, very relevant, where actually I did represent the government of Belgium, and actually in court of saying, but what is actually the meaning of this recommendation? Is it binding us, And we wanted to say, well, as a member states, we are entitled to challenge it, because we want to see whether it is in the ambit, in the competence of the Union to address that matter by a recommendation. And the court has been very diplomatic in its ruling by saying, well, it's a recommendation, it's not binding, therefore you're not allowed to challenge that. But why can you not challenge that? Because actually it is limited, it is only there to persuade states, it's not making any binding obligation, it is not even a matter of loyalty under the treaty to implement the recommendation. So these are elements that are considered for me building blocks. So I could go along still a long time, Mr. President, but I think there are other people who are also looking forward to discuss. But my conclusion is very simple. I believe that actually lobbying is an essential part of today's world, where any regulatory framework, where any actually way that you need to be in controversial disputes, you need a cooperation between professionals registered in a transparent way and other actually professions like lawyers, like communication experts, all cooperating, and that must take place at all levels. So my speech was more as advocating for the recognition rather than saying what are the conditions to be recognized. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Before I give, preden dam besedo naslednjemu, naj samo rečem, da me pa žalosti, da v Sloveniji, ko greš z odvetnikom skupaj na sestanek in lobiraš v državnem zboru, je praktično odvetnik sankcioniran, če je z lobistom na lobističnem sestanku.
You are accompanied by a lawyer speaking to a public office holder. The lawyer can be sanctioned for being involved in lobbying contacts. I will now pass the floor to our next guest, Markus Eder, Vice President of the Austrian Public Affairs Association. You have the floor.
Good morning, Honorable President of the National Council, Honorable President of the National Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, dear MEPs. On behalf of the Austrian Public Affairs Association, I have the big honor to talk about Austrian situation with regard to the issue of lobbying and public affairs. Within the next 10 minutes, I will give an answer to the question, what is professional lobbying? I will introduce the code of conduct, basis of professionalism in Austria. I will tell about professional lobbying in the eyes of politics and public. And I will close with the Austrian Lobbying and Interest Representation Transparency Act and Registry. What is lobbying? The image of the professional lobbying is a sum of the behavior of an industry and the public perception of the same. The professional lobbying industry in Austria has been growing continuously for a good 20 years and is creating corresponding new positions in companies, associations, and agencies. Industry estimates assume that around 3,000 to 5,000 people are pursuing this professional activity in Austria today. Under the aegis of the Austrian Public Affairs Association, the voluntary representation of the interests of the industry in Austria, the industry was able to develop towards a very high level of professionalization in terms of compliance, best practice, and best behavior today. The association's code of conduct, which has been the industry standard for more than 10 years, plays a central role. The form of self-regulation with non-members of the association, also like the use of the rules of the conduct, not only defines behavioral norms, but also reflects the self-esteem of the industry. It should be noted that self-esteem and self-confidence are very strong in Austria. The code of conduct is the basis of professionalism. Representation of interest and exchange of information are the key elements of a healthy and prosperous democracy. They need to be supported to the interest of all participants of the political arena. Interest groups in public affairs, experts of companies, associations, NGOs, trade organizations, associations, and agencies are valuable mediators between the economy, politics, the administration, and civil society. A high sense of personal integrity, social sensitivity, and transparency is necessary to conduct public affairs. In a continuous process of professionalization, the Austrian Public Affairs Association developed a code of conduct, binding its members. The ÖPAV code is based on international role models. In enacting a code of conduct, the ÖPAF shows its commitment to transparency and quality standards in politics, civil society, clients, and to the public. ÖPAF members regard their work as providing information and representing interest. We are convinced that they make a significant and legitimate contribution to basic democratic process like defining opinion and making decision. In their work, the ÖPAF members support and comply with all applicable laws and fundamental rights, such as freedom of speech, right of information, the independence of media, and the protection of personal rights. Integrity, transparency, and the compliance with the basic democratic order are requirements for the work of ÖPAF members and are an integral part of the self-conception. In the following, I will give an overview about the most important points of the Code of Conduct. Honesty and transparency. ÖPAF members must be honest and accurate in their interrelations with clients, political institutions, legislative and executive bodies, the media, and the public. They must not mislead by using inaccurate and incomplete information. Members of the ÖPAS must pay attention of transparency. They must disclose their client's identity when acting on their behalf, confidentially and conflict of interest. ÖPAF members are committed to discretion at their work. Meetings with politician members of administration must be confidential unless otherwise agreed. Consultants must protect confidential information and protect the privacy rights of their current and former clients. Confidential information concerning current and former clients must not be passed without the client's explicit approval. ÖPAF members must not accept an assignment that may cause conflicts of interest. Dishonest methods. In representing the client's interest, ÖPAF members must refrain from any dishonest or illegal behavior. They must not give direct or indirect financial incentives. If a client requests an illegal form of action for the consultant would have to decline the request and inform the client about the reasons for his decline. No discrimination. ÖPAF members must not discriminate against gender, religious beliefs, ethical backgrounds, age, disability, or sexual orientations. ÖPAF members must not participate in discriminatory actions. Respect. ÖPAF members must treat their clients, colleagues, and contacts respectfully. They must consider their personal and professional reputation and strengthen it whenever possible. Incompatibility. The work of public affairs professionals is not compatible with a function in administrative or executive bodies, including bodies of the European Union, protecting and advancing the profession competition. ÖPAF members must avoid any behavior that could damage the reputation of the public affairs business or the ÖPAF or its members. And compensation. A very important point, ÖPAF members must sign written contracts with their clients, determining the terms and conditions of the services, including a reasonable payment. Commission payments must not be offered or accepted. Professional lobbying in the eyes on the public perception. In Austrian politics, lobbying is basically seen as neutral, with tendency towards positive. It must be said here that the term of lobbying per se does not enjoy a very positive image in Austria, but that the professional and serious work of the actors in politics is viewed consistently positively. When the Austrian Gaming Act came in force in 2013, the accompanying material to the law in the parliament stated, in a democratic decision-making and transparent and regulated lobbying is quite viewed positively. Lobbying can support political processes by providing valuable information and insights improve. The activities also serve to strengthen civil society. Parliament also made the following statement. What the lobbying law cannot do is fight corruption. This is where criminal law comes into the play. And it's precisely at this point that the problem lies in the public perception of lobbying in general. Fueled by media reports, alleged criminal offenses such as bribery are repeatedly equated with lobbying. In the public perception, lobbying is therefore de facto maybe the same as corruption. So if the picture of professional lobbying represents the sum of the behavior of an industry and the public perception of the same, then unfortunately all the efforts of the industry and the legislator to develop professional and serious lobbying are not enough to recognize lobbying as something positive overall. Nevertheless, lobbying in Austria is today a professional branch, and it's also accepted as such in the politics. Having gone through decades of tight, closed interest mediation systems that gave exclusively the right to few institutions, Austria faced a rush towards a pluralistic, free market interest mediation system from the year 2000 onwards. This short but intense period was stopped, not short, by a return to the traditional Austrian interest mediation system, but also by a series of scandals involving corruption and intransparent funding of political parties. These scandals were labeled lobbying scandals, leading to a quick halt of the developments public affairs had made in the years before. The political answer to this crisis was the introduction of a lobbying and interest representation registration law enacted in January 2013. This law established a federal mandatory register for all structured, organized contact aimed at influencing political decision-making, including administration in Austria. The law specifies that contacts in this connex simply means political decision-makers, including their employees, civil servants on federal as well as on regional level. Registration by consulting agencies, companies, non-governmental organizations, associations, and chambers must be made before lobbying activities are allowed to begin. Furthermore, companies and consulting agencies have to comply with the code of conduct, which has to be communicated via their respective websites. The online register was implemented on January 1st, 2013, and is administered by the Federal Minister of Justice. Following the unique characteristics of the Austrian political and interest mediation system described above, it seems to be coherent that the registration law, with all its exemptions, became something typically Austrian. Because exempted from the law on the requirement of registration are lawyers, as long as they do not lobby, members of the parliament, if they lobby their own respective policies, political parties, churches and religious groups, organizations representing communities. Only limited requirements for registration are in place for institutions of the social partnership, including their 9 regional as well as the technical sub-organizations. This means Federal Chamber of Commerce, Federal Chamber of Unions, Federal Chamber of Employees, and the Federal Organization of Agriculture. The system of the Austrian lobbying registration. The mandatory register consists of 4 sections, separating actors and establishing different levels of transparency. Section A and A2 contains the lobbying companies. In this section, 120 companies are listed, and the required information, which is public, you can see the following. It's basic information about the lobbying company, plus the website, description of the scope of activities, code of conduct they comply to, I mentioned before, names and dates of birth of all employed lobbyists, number of lobbying clients, and the annual total turnover regarding lobbyist contracts. Then there is a required information which is not public, and this contains the names of the clients and relevant information about each lobbying client of a consulting agency, and the scope of the respective lobbying activities. In Section B, there are 157 listings. This is a company employing in-house lobbyists. Required information by public is the following. Basic information about the company plus their website, description of the scope of activities, code of conduct they comply to, names and dates of birth of all employed lobbyists, and annual expenditures for lobbying more than 100,000 euro, and you have to either click yes or no. And then there are sections C and D, it's self-governing bodies and associations. The required information for those is a website, number of the employees engaged predominantly in interest representation, and an estimate of annual cost of the interest representation. This is the environment of professional working in the field of public affairs and interest representation in Austria. The Austrian Public Affairs Association, together with others, is continuously working with political decision makers to bring about the necessary changes in the regulatory framework in Austria. Since the very beginning, the term of lobbying has had a very negative image in Austria and is thus not used very much. Although it is not legitimate to use the terms of lobbying and public affairs interchangeably, it has become industry practice to call the function public affairs. At least to some degree, this also mirrors the practice that most practitioners in Austria are conducting public affairs rather than lobbying as a single public affairs technique. At this point, I want to thank you very much for your attention and close my remarks on this topic. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Markus. Hvala, Markus Eder. In prosim Dominika Majerja, predsednika organizacije DGPOL, direktor Miller & Meyer Consulting, da nam predstavi profesionalno lobiranje v Nemčiji.
So hello, thank you very much, Mr. President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, to be here. I make it really short and I speak not as Miller-Meyer, as my consultant business. I'm the president of the DGPOL, the German Association of Political Consultants, and a lot of things are still discussed, and I have to say you are absolutely right to do this on this place. I'm so proud. I congratulations to the association, to all of us, to have this important event in the national parliament. I tried since 20 years to do this in Germany. It was never function because, oh, you are the bad guys, the bad lobbyists. You cannot speak in the parliament. So congratulations again, because it's a really important event, a clear signal that we are all listen to everybody, because at the end, what is lobbying? Who is a lobbyist? Everybody is a lobbyist. Still, Mrs. Merkel, Mr. Scholz is the first lobbyist of Germany in Brussels. So we come and see every time this important point. And of course, I go to the next chart, but interest of representation is a fundamental right of everybody. It's a constitutional right for everybody to do it. And we have to help other people to understand it, like our colleague from Brussels has said in Brussels. And we have to do it transparent, on a clear and ethical way. And now coming to the point, because this is a typical picture in the mind of everybody. We are the big manipulator of politicians and of the system. That's completely wrong. We are not manipulator. We are an absolute professional business with clear standards. And we know how we do it. And now I come to DigiPol. I would like, because as a colleague of Michael, to make it clear. We founded 2002. DigiPol as an association, and we are happy that we are with our sister organization together now here to make three important things clear. We believe in quality standards, in ethical standards, and we have to prove it. Everybody have to prove it. And of course, we have to professionalize our business together. And of course, we have to speak with everybody, with our colleagues, also with our opponents. It's a really, really important point. And of course, like our good friend of Austria mentioned, we need a kind of mandatory lobby registration system who is everybody in. I come later to this point. But this is a really most important point why we developed and established DigiPol. And what we have done in the last 5 years, because how we can bring the younger generation also to understand what we are doing, we have started a big training program for young people who are interested in politics, in lobbying, in public affairs, to train not only quality, only ethical standards, because it's an experience in life in doing things. Because sometimes it's not too easy, and everybody knows from your side how complicated it is to see what is right and what is wrong, because the gray area in the middle is really, really complicated. And often you have to think and debate with your colleagues every special case day by day. So that's a really important point. And secondly, all our colleagues mentioned, it's DigiPol W, this means the women part. Only 20% of all public affairs lobbyist personalities in Germany are females. So we have to, we need much more also of women in our business. And it's a really man business up to now, and we try also to establish this, change this system. And what's important is also for us, it's not only all happen within lobby law, it's also self-regulation of your system. And what we have done in the last 5 years to have developed a kind of press council, like a lobbying council and public affairs council for self-regulation. We have a clear internal structuring, and we have colleagues from outside helping us, from the civil society, So from Transparency International on one hand and the business association on the other hand, to do it together. Because what is the most important point? If you are in the newspapers or in the media, and we make really clear, this practice, what you have done as XYZ was wrong. And you can read it with your name in the newspaper. Better than ever law is the self-regulation, it's really function. So that's also my point to give to you as a kind of discussion point for the future. And this means also you have to speak with our opponents. Lobby control, you know it also from Brussels, our opponents. And it makes sense because also I'm the board of the Transparency International in Germany to speak with your opponents, how you can develop together best practices. Not to see the NGOs as your opponents, no, they are important partner to come further. Of course, you have a lot of different points and conflict of interest. But it's an important point also, if you mean dialogue as public affairs and lobby is really true, do it with partnership. And what we have done, also I'm proud that your Michael Association is also part of it, we create a kind of public affairs community of Europe. That's only Brussels, so every national entity who have a public lobbying association are now in a new association, so the association of lobbyists. So we organized what we're doing here everywhere in Europe. So it's not only European Union, that's completely done in Europe. And what we're doing, exactly, we speak about what is best practices in transparency, in quality, in ethical standards. Because it's completely different. Your situation in your nice, wonderful capital, Ljubljana, is completely different from Berlin. And Berlin is completely different from Paris. But we have to come together and speak and to understand each other. Lobbying is completely different function in your country than in Germany. So I'm a good lobbyist in Germany, but here in your country, nobody will speak with me. I'm not your nationality, I have no idea how your systems really function. So this is all what we have to do, and this PACE is a really important next step, also together with our colleagues in Brussels, to develop this further. And I don't speak a lot about this, but it's every time, if you speak about transparency and confidentiality, you have every kind of this dialectic process. Of course, we have to be transparent on one hand, but on the other hand, you need political situations you can speak in private. It makes no sense if your prime minister speaks openly about his strategy. It's nonsense. So we have to see what really means transparency. Transparency is an important functional element, but it's not all. So we have to be very careful and to see every time, yes, we have particular interest as company or as an association. But on the other hand, you have to be part of the common good. You have to bring the interest of democracy and our democratic European system together with your particular interest. So all we can debate a lot of things, but this kind of dialectic, it's not too easy to say yes or no. It's a little bit of complicated between. Also, we have done now a lobby registration system in Germany. It started beginning of this year. All have to be in end of this week. We have not only 520, we have now around 1,600. I expect we have more than 10,000. Because why? And now coming to my last point. The key element of lobby law and lobby discussions is the question of definition of lobbying. I can tell you, and with all my colleagues, and also from Netherlands, from Austria, from Brussels also, and from Switzerland, all the debates start and end with the definition of lobbying. Also for the question of what is corruption? It's not too easy to say this is corruption or not. It's a complicated process in a systematic way to understand. So this is a really, really important point for all of us. If you speak about lobbying, make a clear definition of what is lobbying. And the German government decided, after a lot of fights, that all contacts, direct or indirectly, to parliamentarians, to every parliamentarian, and for the moment, in the ministries, up to the department level, up to the ministers, are included. Every contact, direct or indirectly. That means we have only some assumption, diplomatic personalities, of course, the churches, of course, the trade unions. A big debate about this, but that's the only exception. So every other personnel, you are individual or a company, association, NGOs, have to be now mandatory in our registration. This is an important point. This is, as for me, is the only point you can do it. This is constitutional law. Everybody is equal. And if is everybody equal and everybody is a lobbyist, perhaps at home, with your family, with my kids, I have to lobby every day, and perhaps you too. So this make it clear. And that's my point, lobby definition. And for me in Germany, we decided, and I think a good point, everybody's a lobbyist at the end, and everybody have to be in. If you have direct contacts with politicians and the ministries on a regularly clear structured way, this means if you're angry and you have problems with some things and you are a normal citizen to go to your parliamentarian, it's different. But if you have a clear structured interest to lobby or to influence politics, you have to be in. And everybody. Also the public sector, it's an important point. Also the procurement, really, really important. Big debate and now big pressure to our chancellor to stop it. But also the public procurement is completely in. So all the management consultants are in. So you know exactly what's going on and whose money is in or not. This is an important point, and I would like to thank you. And I'm proud that you do this today in this very famous place. And I wish you all the best, and I hope I was not too long. And thank you very much for the brilliant translation every time this morning, and to translate us. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, Dominik. Hvala, Dominik Majer. In naprošen Dominika Rebra, partnerja Herzl Neff Schmidt Counselors, da bo predstavil profesionalno lobiranje v Švici. In še preden dam besedo, jaz se bom v svojem predavanju prezentaciji
I will renounce my presentation because we are running quite late, and I will use what I have prepared later on in the roundtable debate. We are running late, so we will conclude with this round of presentations and then have a short break.
Esteemed Mr. President of the National Council, esteemed members of Parliament, Government and Association, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored and proud to be with you today. I'm coming from, I would say when I came to Ljubljana, I felt like being with a sister democracy, coming from Switzerland, because it's a very nice place, it's a beautiful place, it's like I'm used to, I was just saying, like it's like in Zurich a little bit. I feel at home very fast.
But we still have to learn a lot about democracy.
Oh, so that is also like a point why I'm here. I don't know if I can teach something, I don't think so. But what I can do is I can give you a small insight in a country that is for a long time now democratic and that has a system that is built up from bottom. So where municipalities and citizens are the source of power, and where even between municipalities the income taxation is very different, because we only give to the next level, like our cantons or like the federal government, what we really cannot keep in our hands in the municipality. So it's really something where we have a long political culture of also taking share as citizens of the democratic process. And I have brought some examples that might not be so sophisticated as my former speakers from Brussels or from Germany that have highly developed schemes of how to regulate lobbying. But what I can bring in perhaps is a long experience of integration of stakeholders into political dialogue. Because all of you know that in the political process, shaping opinions and making decisions is a complex process where it's very annoying that the other side always also has an argument. And it's very painful to let in different thinking and different ideas and different approaches. But in the end, what I can tell you is we have learned in our country that leaving out opinions not respecting other views is in our country always leading to a political referendum that then will stop the political process, or in the even worse case, it will lead to a situation where after some years we are reminded that we should have taken consideration of this other view because it would have strengthened the political decision that we had taken a time ago. So when I'm looking at lobbying, and I'm working in lobbying since 20 years now in Switzerland, I can only share my experience where I have to say that I'm living in a country where two elements of success are really crucial. One is good political decisions need time. They need time for debate. They need time for exchange. And good political decisions in a democratic system deserve appropriate lobbying by all groups of interest in order to assure that every voice is heard before a really good decision is being taken. And that is a crucial point for a successful democratic system that can generate sustainable policy. So this is kind of the core of my speech. And I give you like only short examples because I was also asked, you know, we had this corona pandemic, and I am so thankful that when coming to the airport, I have learned that I need no longer a PCR test to travel. And I'm also so happy to see faces, to meet people again, to travel, and to also be in a situation where I can like feel a solidarity with people that I can really meet and discuss things in such a free way. But let me share the experience of Corona in a direct democratic country, because for me this was a test that I have not lived before in the experience of my lifespan. In the Corona situation, the country went into a crisis mode. This is the only situation where the Swiss government can take control over policy for a certain period of time without asking population. So government went into crisis mode, did the regulations, and had then to enshrine them in a law that was put into parliament. Like always in Switzerland, you have two sides. And the opposition to the action of the government was really strong. There were strong people taking the lead on bringing forward a referendum against the law, against the crisis regulation, and they had a huge funding, billionaires, that said we do not agree. And we had a first vote on that regulation, and the government got support from the population with 60%. Does mean that 40% were in opposition. It's a strong minority. The next law had to be enacted on the same topic because it already had changed during the pandemic situation. We had to do changes to the law. And the second referendum was held. And the second referendum was still financed by the same persons with a lot of political pressure, power, media attention. What happened? The Swiss citizen decided with 62% that they were standing behind the government and the regulation. And now something very interesting is happening. All those 38% that were in opposition feel now that the majority has taken a decision, and now we come back together as a unified country under the majority rule. So when we talk about lobbying and when we talk about influencing, something that is very important to me, to my heart, and also to my, I would say, my conviction as a Democrat, if people do annoy me with their views, if people might have good arguments and I don't like them, I let them in, and I let them in a regulated way to contribute to the debate in order to assure that the best arguments win and not those that work in the background, those that come to the forefront, that position themselves, speak openly, speak freely, are able to convince, and then a democratic system can take really good decisions that stand also the test of time. And with that, you will see that what I have prepared is a little bit different than what I have said. But it's really an inspiration to be with you, and I'm very proud that you are taking the step to really discuss those elements in such a great format. And I wish you best luck to really find a good way of integrating the resources of lobbying into your political process in order to shape better, strong, and even results where the world will look at you and say, wow, these guys, they really make a difference because their policies, they really stand the test of time. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Michael, for having invited me. And also thank you for the wonderful translation. Without that, I would be completely lost and confused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic. And now I would like to give the floor to Peter Walraven, partner of Public Matters and member of the Dutch Association of Lobbyists.
Good day, greetings. Thank you, President of the Council, President of the Assembly. Thank you, Michael, for organizing this, dear members, and dear anybody who is listening to the live stream. Representing the Netherlands today, I'm the owner of one of the leading public affairs consultancies in the Netherlands. It's called Public Matters. And we were founded on the principle that lobbying is a profession, something that should be considered a profession, should be treated professionally. I now spent half my life bridging the gap between business and politics, policy makers, creating mutual understanding. And that is for me the key word of today. That has become my guiding principle, and it will be the key part of what I want to share with you today. I want to do that in 3 parts. One of them, and it's based on what is currently happening in the Netherlands on lobbying and currently happening in my profession. The first part is countervailing power. The second part is the balancing transparency. And the third part, for me the most important one, is empathy. So first, on countervailing power. Lobbying cannot be seen apart from the strength and the quality of countervailing power. I can make a comparison. The Dutch parliament consists of 150 MPs. We have a population of 17 million residents in the Netherlands. That means about 123 residents per MP. I think in Slovenia it's about 1 per 23,000. It's something that is debated many times, but we don't want to extend it, while we should have. As a result of this, I see companies speaking with MPs. And I'll give you another example, another figure. In the Netherlands, in 2000, we had about 10 political parties. We now have 19. So we have a scattered parliament. There are MPs responsible for infrastructure issues, a fraction of 5. That means they are responsible for maritime policy, for aviation policy, for circular economy, and for many other things, which is almost impossible to give any sense of the content of what is happening. So that makes lobbyists more important, but also more powerful. For me, an important message is today, when you regulate lobbying, also make sure that you secure the countervailing power on the political level, but also on the government level. Also there an example, the Dutch government in the past decade has been decreased, and decreasing. So we are from a principle of having a small central government, while at the moment the topics are becoming more complicated. The regulation from Brussels is more complicated. And we've seen the result in the COVID pandemic, where we had a Ministry of Healthcare that was not able to really lead the way in the pandemic because, well, this ministry was getting smaller and smaller and was not able to really take a structural lead there. And we had a lot of issues with it. So countervailing power in the parliament at the governmental level, And lobbying regulation, in my opinion, will lose its effect if there is no countervailing power. And it will also result in an increase of legislation of lobbying, of a legalization of lobbying. Sorry, I'm the wrong word. That is something, a trend we also see in the Netherlands. We see an increase of lobbying through litigation, especially by NGOs. One big issue in the Netherlands currently is a nitrogen crisis, but we see an increasing way of lobbying through court, which is, well, obviously it's an option, but what I see in my work, it does not add to a dialogue, because once you go to court, there is not an open dialogue anymore, because everything becomes legal. So that's about the countervailing power. Then about transparency, which is obviously the buzzword when we talk about lobby regulation. But I feel there's also a paradox with transparency leading to better regulation. There's a Dutch professor, Paul Frissen is his name, who wrote an intriguing book about transparency. It's called The Secret of the Last State. And one of his things he said, this book is about the right to have a secret for each individual. We find it normal, according to our privacy regulation, but in order to secure freedom, the state needs its own secrets. So it's important that also the state needs its secrets. That's why we have intelligence services. But the same applies, in my opinion, to the conversation that must be able to be held here in the private conversations an interested party has with an MP or with another government official. I think I agree with what Dominic Meyer told before. If we make everything transparent, there is no open conversation anymore. And also there, the dialogue is reduced. Netherlands is currently at a stage where we are proud of it. We call it in the Netherlands our polder model, which is, I think, English translation. We are always proud of our Rhineland model. But it's losing ground. Specifically, the relation between business and government is deteriorating, and especially large businesses. I won't elaborate on the examples, but I can just mention Shell, Unilever, proud Dutch companies that aren't Dutch companies anymore. We had an issue with a dividend tax. So the relation is deteriorating. And I see it as going hand in hand with the demand for more transparency from government officials. We don't currently have a formal and regulated lobbyist register. I personally are looking at what is happening in Germany, and I like the idea about the definition, although still the church and the unions are excluded. We can have a discussion on that maybe later on, or you can have a discussion on that. I'm an active member of the Dutch Association for Public Affairs, an association that has a voluntary register and a code of ethics. My problem with registers, I'm not against it, but is how to define a lobbyist. And I fully agree with what Dominic Meyer has told before. Because is it the CEO of a company, the NGO, the mayor of a large city? What do we have in the Netherlands? Let me highlight 3 elements. We have more than that, but let me just highlight 3 of them. We have a growing discussion about the revolving door, and I've not heard it that too much today, but in the Netherlands, lobbying is about the revolving door. Last year we had a national discussion about our Minister of Infrastructure, who became the chairman of the Association for Energy Companies. That was a large discussion. Actually, we had a state secretary becoming chairman of an international institute. Nobody talked about it, but that institute is also lobbying in the Netherlands.
But is it prescribed by law to exclude?
It's now, that was what I was going to say. We are now imposing rules on political officials at government level on what is allowed for them to lobby after their job, in their next position. So that is something we are now implementing at this moment. There's also legislation on a lobby paragraph that explains in every legislation how interested parties are involved in the process. So every MP, once a law is being sent to Parliament, can see during the process of lawmaking, what stakeholders were involved, what interested parties are involved. We may put more attention to that. And, it's a little thing, but I think it's also worth mentioning here, there's a voluntary gift register in the Parliament. So MPs, if they receive a gift, that can also be a ticket to a football match, they put it in that register. But it's voluntary, but it's, again, transparent. So transparency is good, but awareness is better. And also there, Dominic, I fully agree with you. I really appreciate the fact that you're having this conversation today because it's so important. And I gave a presentation at the Dutch University of Leiden a few weeks ago, and somebody asked me that question, what if you could, what do you wish for? And this is actually what I would wish for in the Dutch Parliament, to have a proper discussion together on lobbying and how we do that. So my last part is mutual understanding, because for me, everything I do in my work is about creating mutual understanding, about bridging the gap of knowledge between policymakers and businesses. I see now for many years, and it's now, I'm spending half of my life on this, and I tend to spend a little bit more in the coming years. I see businesses do not have an idea about how it is to be an MP. In the Netherlands, you don't switch that often. The Dutch Parliament does not consist of people that had a business. And vice versa. They don't switch positions. And the same goes on the policy makers level, on government official. They tend to stick at the ministry and move from one ministry to another. So, and I see a decreased amount of mutual understanding. I see businesses do not understand what you can really ask from a politician. What's his perspective of active actions he has. And the other way around, I see politicians having assumptions on how businesses work. And for me, the sole goal of a public affairs professional is to bridge that gap, to start with creating mutual understanding. Just understand each other, see what each other's options are. If you have bridged that gap, then you can have a discussion about lobbying and whatever you want. But that's for me the most important part. And I see it happening. It's become my personal drive. And that's why I see an increased importance of something Dominic Reber referred to as stakeholder management. I call on companies to invest in the stakeholder management. Before they go lobbying, make sure that you know what the public wants. Before you ask a public official what you want, you need to understand what the public wants. And that is also by setting up dialogues and understanding what your stakeholders do want. I'm going to conclude. Thank you. Thank you also for the translation. Thank you for having me here. I've been from the very first start feeling very welcome here. I want to give a special compliment to the food here in Slovenia. It's been marvelous. Really, thank you. I hope to enjoy a little bit more of it. And thank you for having this conversation. I'm happy to contribute.
Thank you, Peter. Hvala, Peter.
We will now see the video by Daniel Gergen, who's a partner at EPPA and a professor at the College of Europe and a renowned author.
To be your guest today, even virtually. I know quite well your country. I've been several times, and also one of my books was translated in Slovenian during the time of the negotiations for enlargement. It's a pleasure for me also to speak about my profession, to speak about lobbying. I am a professional lobbyist since a very long time, nearly since 50 years, since half a century. I have had different types of positions. During half of my career, I have managed EU trade associations representing sectors First, the European sugar industry, which was a very important sector at that time, number one in the world. And it was, of course, very important to have a very efficient lobbying structure in the context of the EU-round negotiation for the WTO and also the successive reform of a common agricultural policy. Then after I became Secretary General of COPA-COGECA, representing the All Farmers Union in Europe. Then after I became a consultant, so working for private interests, if you wish, mostly industries and big companies. In parallel with my career, I have been also, and I'm still, a professor in many universities and business school in the US during a long time at Georgetown, which is a mecca of American public affairs, also at Harvard, and in Europe in several universities, presently at the College of Europe in Bruges and in Nathalie. I am also an author. I have published several books, even many books, regarding the functioning of the European Union and also about lobbying and the ways that lobbying is evolving along the successive reform of the EU and the way to be influential within the institutions. This presentation of me is already a signal that to be a lobbyist is something a bit complex. It is a technical and a sophisticated job. It is true that the image of my profession is not good. It is considered by the public opinion as something opaque, with a lot of money in the decision-making processes, a sector with manipulation, why not corruption? And corruption, by the way, is the exact opposite of what you have to do if you want to be an influential lobbyist. But the image is like that. And we are very responsible of the situation because we have been unable to communicate about our profession. And also we have been unable to push for a regulation of our profession. I am very favorable to a regulation of the profession of lobbyist and a representative of interest. It is clear also that this profession is growing in complexity and technicality. In the good old days, to be a lobbyist was relatively simple. You had to be a specialist in something and to identify who was doing what at the commission mostly, and then you were organizing meeting and you were a lobbyist somewhere. Now it's much more difficult and much more different, you know. Now everything is complex and we have to manage three skills in parallel. First of all, we have to be a technician. We have to be a specialist of something. You need to know about agriculture or about energy or about environment. So the first asset is to be credible, technically speaking. But on top of that, you have to add a procedural understanding, how the dossiers are organized, who is deciding what about the parliament, what about the council of ministers, what about the commission, what about impact assessment, what about consultation. So it's very, very complex and difficult with many cases and exceptions, derogations. So you need to know that very well. And finally, you need to be a good communicator because you have the social networks, and the more a dossier is complex, the more you have to keep it simple. So you see, it's a job which is complex, but which is very useful and important because lobbying is a counterpower. Well, lobbying is part of the decision-making process, and lobbying is recognized by the institutions, by the commission, by the parliament, by the council. Any draft regulation, any draft law is submitted for opinion and discussion to the lobbies, either established lobbyists or lobbying structures like EU trade associations or consultants like me when we represent clients. So we are part of the decision-making process and we bring our expertise and we try to be solution makers. Here also we have different categories of lobbyists. Some are representing the civil society, non-governmental organizations. They pretend they represent the general interests of the EU, and some others, like me, are representing industry. So sometimes it's difficult to work together. Everyone is pushing for his own interest. And the conclusion of all that is that influence in Brussels is based on excellence and not on money. So the key criteria to be influential in Brussels is not to have big budget and big resources. The most important is to be credible and to have the art of the job. To conclude on this short presentation, I think it's a good idea for you to regulate lobbying. In Brussels, everyone can establish himself or herself as a professional lobbyist, and I think this is a mistake. We have to take some inspiration from the US, where they have a disclosure act. The lobbyists are regulated, this is fine. You know, if you want to be a doctor, you need to have a certificate. If you want to be a journalist either or a nurse, and here this is not the case. So really, I think that we need to build something light, not too administrative, but never mind with some rules and guidelines, because in our profession, we have sometimes some gray zones, and we have to get rid of them in order to know precisely what is possible, what is not possible, and to have a sort of code of conduct which will be very precise and built in agreement between our profession and the representative of the institutions. I was very pleased to talk to you, even virtually. I will be even more pleased to visit you if you wish during springtime, why not, and to continue this discussion. So very welcome to continue this conversation and to enter much more in detail. I wish you a very good success for your conversation, and more generally, all the best, and see you soon, I hope. Thank you very much.
To je bil profesor Daniel Gauguin. Naj samo povem, jaz sem se z njim srečal v Bruslju.
May I just tell you that I met him in Brussels, and we agreed that his book, Lobbyists, would be translated into Slovenian. So the idea is to have the presentation, the inauguration of the book, the translation in May. So he will come to Slovenia and also conduct a training program for lobbyists. So anybody who will be interested will be invited for the event. And now thank you very much to all contributors. You have presented both the theory as well as the practical examples, but before we embark on discussion, we would like to invite you for a very short coffee break, where you will also be able to chat informally. We'll continue in 10 minutes. Welcome back. We started this morning by saying that we would like to professionalize lobbying, which has covered the gray zone in Slovenia so far. In the US, there are almost 12,000 registered lobbyists. According to Transparency Register, Europe has more than 13,000. I think that the number of people lobbying as unregistered lobbyists is negligible, but the situation in Slovenia is just the other way around. It is very important that we work together, involve all interested individuals, that we involve the media, and that we talk to the users of lobbying. In this way, we can pave the way for legal lobbying, taking into account the highest ethical and moral standards. In addition to our morning guests and speakers, we also have some panelists with us. Professor Dr. Sanja Basic, who is an expert on media, Vita Habjan, who works at the Corruption Prevention Commission, Dr. Barbara Toplak-Perovic of the Alma Mater Europea, and they will all have to face the president of the Slovenian Association for Legal Lobbying, Michael Ziegler. So, as you can see, we have made sure that we have the right balance, not just in terms of professional views, but also from the point of view of gender. But on a more serious note, speaking about the history of lobbying, in 30 years, the legislative branch of power has not done its homework. Why do we not have a law, an act governing this matter? Mr. Ziegler. First of all, I would like to welcome all panelists. Now, as regards your question on the legislation, I have to say that the legislation is there. One cannot say that we are lacking the legislation. We have the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act adopted in 2010 by the recommendation of the OECD. But even before that, there have been attempts to legislate this area. We know that Mr. Moge and Dr. Cyril Ribicic have made an attempt on the Lobbying Act. This would have been the best solution for us, but since integrity and prevention of corruption had to be governed, they adopted a relevant act and included lobbying. So today, lobbying is part of that act. Also, an association of lobbyists has been stipulated. So we do have a good legislative basis, and it is indeed quite good. But is the Slovenian society mature enough to accept, to adopt lobbying? We have been through a transition period, and some practices from the old system are still present today. But Slovenia was born as a child is born, and then it went through puberty with a lot of chaos, but now we are adults, and that means that we have to become mature. And that means that we need to overcome the current situation, including what is happening in the media. The media, together with politics, have helped demonize lobbying.
je bilo, veliko smo se ukvarjali z definicijo lobiranja.
Before, definition of lobbying has been mentioned. In Slovenia, we do have such a definition. And I can tell you, a lobbyist is a person performing the activity of lobbyist, entered in the register, or a person who is lobbying and is employed by an interest organization in which he or she is working. The conditions that have to be met to be registered as a lobbyist are: you have to be full of age, no criminal offenses, and so on. But those are the minimum conditions. Talking about the legislative process, where you influence public office holders, where you lobby in the parliament, in the National Assembly, in the council. You can lobby at the local community, councillors, mayors. Lobbyists are present at all these levels. And may I say that it would be mature if we had not 80, but 1,000, 1,800 persons registered. In the EU Parliament, you have 30 lobbyists per MEP. In Slovenia, out of all registered lobbyists, 1/4 of them is actually making a living on lobbying. In other countries, lobbyist is a normal profession, and more will need to be done. And it's us who have to do something. This is why we established our association, the Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying. Code of ethics, self-regulations are extremely important, but we will place the biggest emphasis on education and training. Until now, the Corruption Prevention Commission provided education and training for the government, for the parliament, but we believe that it is only right that we too should provide education and training, not just for lobbyists, but also for members of the media, politicians, councillors, mayors. We will be present everywhere. We'll knock on each and every door, because we have seen that as a result of the unregulated situation, we have become nasty to one another. In Brussels, for example, small countries will have 10 times more lobbyists than Slovenia, because if you are present, then you exist. But since we're not present, it's very tough. Mrs. Habjan-Barborić, talking about lobbying, corruption is always there. At least that's the perception of the public at large. So do you think there is an association, and how is illegal lobbying prosecuted? Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation. Now, very briefly, I would like to shed some light on why lobbying is governed by the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act. Before 2010, we had a Corruption Prevention Act, but then we realized that integrity standards need to be emphasized more for those of us present in the public sector. This is why a new law was passed, and in its title, in addition to prevention of corruption, there is also integrity. We found that in other European countries, integrity is not defined in such a way. So, with our legislation, we are trying to strengthen the integrity of individuals, be it civil servants or holders of public office. We have heard today several times that lobbying is a legal and legitimate way for interest organizations through lobbies to have an influence on decision-making centers. And the purpose is to include as many interest groups and the whole plethora of interests represented by individuals, so that at the end of the day, when a decision is made, it should be transparent, balanced, and that it takes into account different interests as well as reservations that have been expressed. But now, why this is associated with corruption? Lobbying as a mechanism for accessing centers of power is used by some influential individuals and groups who have power, money, and access. Revolving doors have been mentioned before. This may be people who used to work in the public sector, who know the right people, and who can exploit their friendships. And here we come across the gray zone. Financing of political parties is also a gray zone. And some people may use their ability to access decision-making centers, and at the end of the day, the result, the strategy, will only take into account partial interest, it will distort competition, and may result in the complete exclusion of a particular interest group. Corruption is not defined in any international instrument. However, we all understand what corruption is. It is abuse of power for personal gain. And speaking about lobbying as a way of influencing centers of public decision-making, we have to bear in mind that those allowing partial interests to invade the public sphere and that they overcome the public interest, it means that the centers, the decision-making centers, have ignored all other interests, all interest organizations, that they did not follow only the public interest, but instead opted for a partial interest, and they elevated it to the level of legislation. And this is why we sometimes speak about these two phenomena being intertwined. There are some public officials who have ended up in corruption, because if they follow partial interest, they got something in return. And this is why sometimes there is a chaos between lobbying and corruption. Sometimes, therefore, lobbying is also associated with corruption. Well, thank you very much. Media have been mentioned. Professor Dr. Basic, the role of the media in the perception of lobbying, explicit distinction between what is legal and what is not. The role of the media is exceptional, particularly in the era of the mass media. Therefore, it seems that media played a role in generating this negative role of lobbying. Why do you think this is the case? Well, first of all, I would like to thank Michal for convincing me to participate. Usually, I decline all such invitations, but this is only to show that he managed to convince me, but that's not lobbying, that was just convincing. But what convinced me was when he introduced himself. He said he is the president of the Association for Legal Lobbying. And I thought, wow, in this country where so many things are wrong, we now have an association for legal lobbying that wants to make a distinction between those who are doing the right thing and those who are not. As regards the Corruption Prevention Commission, I visited your website. There are 80 lobbyists on your website, most of them registered for audio-visual politics. And there is not a single person that we read about in the media. And this, I think, is a good metaphor for Slovenia. We all know who are the ones lobbying illegally. But nobody dares to say that the emperor is naked and that would need a radical solution. Of course, media report on this, but do you really believe if the media started praising lobbies, things would be radically different? I don't think so. But there is one thing, and I think that's key. That's also key to understanding our today's situation. In 2017, in Malta, Daphne Caruana Galizia was murdered. She was the one who pointed to extreme cases of illegal practices conducted by the president of the country. In one of his appearances, he said that the only opposition in Malta was her, the journalist. That's horrible. A few months ago, an independent commission accused the state in a report of 430 pages, and they used an expression which could be used in Slovenia as well. And they said that the journalist was killed due to the impunity culture. We are allowing for things that are illegal, that are problematic, we are allowing those things to happen. Institutions are blaming one another, and they simply don't do anything. So the bottom line is that lobbying is, of course, legal until it encroaches on the corruption. And the gentleman from the Netherlands mentioned complete transparency. I would be horrified of living in a completely transparent society. That's China. We get our labels and everybody, or rather, somebody knows everything about you. But I think all the steps need to be clear. The public needs to know who participated in lobbying, who represented which interest, and the legislation that is adopted should be in the interest of the public, regardless of who lobbied for what. Finally, I have read your definition of corruption, and I'm using it on media. Media that don't work in the public interest are corrupt in their nature. Media acting for partial interests are corrupt. And in our media space, we have extremely many corrupt media. If we want to legalize the illegal corruption practices, and may I mention that those who lobbied illegally for many years, that they should be put behind the bars. But I think that what we need to do is also to combat corruption in the media, and it's the state that is responsible for that. And non-transparent financing of the media by state institutions, by state-owned companies, that's the biggest problem. There is discrimination, there is no transparency, and there is no justice.
Well, thank you very much. My question did not pertain to media praising lobbying, but it was about media being involved in differentiating between legal and illegal lobbies. No, that's something that needs to be done by law enforcement. What we're trying to give to the media should be done by law enforcement. Well, yes, obviously, the first level would be law enforcement, and then secondly, it's in the interest of the public to know who is doing illegal things. Ms. Toplak, as a representative of an educational institution, you could obviously speak about good practices of lobbying. Let me ask you, have you come across the need for lobbying when there was no appropriate legislation, when you turned to lobbyists to enact certain changes? Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, I come from an educational institution that a few years ago faced a major issue that we were unable to resolve ourselves, even though we have 3 people who have PhDs in law in our management, but we nevertheless were not able to resolve this issue. Let me briefly describe what happened. Slovenia was inviting foreign students. That was a priority in Slovenia, to attract foreign students to our institutions. We had 300 Italian students coming to our institutions in various stages of their studies, and in the course of their studies, the state changed the law and requested that in order to complete their studies, they're required to submit proof of their knowledge of the Slovene language. We exposed this issue in the media. The minister promised that things would change, but he aborted this mission very quickly. The next minister also promised some change and resigned. And we soon realized that given that ministers succeeded one another very quickly, we would not get what we needed. And somebody mentioned that they were meeting with a lobbyist, and I figured, yes, it would be useful to get in touch with the lobbyist. So I went to a meeting, and that was the first time I came across the possibility of hiring a professional lobbyist. When I mentioned this to people, everyone was sort of dubious, as if I hired a crook. And I had to explain to everyone that in Slovenia we do have professional lobbyists who are engaged in this profession, that those are not crooks coming in through the back door, but that they actually go in through the main entrance. We had a very positive experience in the end. We managed to get heard by all the parliamentary parties. We were able to explain our issue to everyone, and even though those who could tried to go against that till the very end, the result in the end was very clear, and all the MPs who were present adopted our proposals for the change of legislation, who allowed these students to finish their studies. So you have 300 students who waited 3 years to be able to complete their studies, which means there were 900 years lost in total. And I don't think we could have achieved this without professional lobbying. Despite all of the PhDs in law, we did not know how to go about this. We didn't have the competences to go about this. I also came to the conclusion that very few people actually know about the possibility of legal lobbying. Most people view lobbyists as someone who comes in through the back door. And I personally believe that all those who enter through the back door should be sanctioned, and that we should make a very clear distinction between legal and the illegal lobbyists. Illegal lobbyists obviously need to be sanctioned, and legal lobbyists need to be promoted, because we need people who will represent the interest of the lay public, the general public, and this public has an interest, and often this is a legitimate interest. But you need someone to open your door at the ministry, and they will not open the door to the general public. But I think corruption takes place elsewhere. It takes place in courts when it needs to be determined which judge a case will be assigned to. At the ministries, it takes place where it's decided who will participate in a working group. Those who come to the table often take something away from the table as well. And I think corruption takes place elsewhere than what we are looking at. It's in the envelopes. But that's, I don't think that's the prevailing phenomenon in Slovenia. That's not where the danger lies. The danger lies in the systemic corruption. And I can agree with what has been said about the media. Quite often, unless you have a PR who you're paying very well, your story will not be heard. Well, yes, it seems that politicians are active, that our MPs do meet with lobbyists, and that people know that things have to change in this field. There are trends towards professionalization, but why do we not see anything happening? Thank you very much for your question. If there were a genuine interest in politics to promote lobbying in the National Assembly, in the individual ministries, then, and if we did expect everyone to prove that they are registered, and if that were a prerequisite for talking to someone, things would be a lot easier. But a lot has been said, and I have to make a distinction, not because I wanted to point my finger at anyone, but in the media and in terms of the corruptiveness of the media, there is a practice that has establish itself. Politicians like to be in the attention of the media, and the media need to write about the politicians, and then there are certain agencies that are somewhere in between. And agencies will often approach the media, and we do have certain information from journalists which indicates that what happens is that a journalist is told, if you will not write about this politician in this manner, we will limit your room for maneuver. So there is even an industry, I could put it, somewhere in between that can affect the laws that are passed. So we need to have a different approach. I'm not talking about becoming China and having 100% transparency, but a lot has to be done by us, by lobbyists. We need to also pay attention. We need to register any illegal activity we come across. We do this too rarely because we perceive sometimes these other people as competition, but you may have someone who is a member of a local authority who has their own minister, so to speak, and this minister is then sent off to meet with all the right people, and everything is adopted just like the master wanted. Well, we have a good law, the Integrity Act. We don't see that as the best place to regulate lobbying, but be that as it may, we are supposed to have a register containing all the names. But a lot of people still feel that they don't want to be in the spotlight, that they want to be subject to requirements. So that's where we are. But I have to say also that you know that there are political parties and that there is Article 67 about the disclosure of information, which means that you have the right to access all the materials used by parties when adopting or discussing a bill, but we never ever have received any of this material. For example, this Integrity Act has been around for 20 years, but I've never been able to receive any kind of material. And while in Brussels, for example, the Commission is constantly bombarded with such requests, and lobbyists are always very much aware of all the current publications, of all such information requests, because if you want to do well for your client, you have to be able to advise them. But obviously nobody can know everything. You cannot be a farmer, an engineer, and obviously also a farmer knows what to do with his land, but he will not be able to distinguish between the first and second and third reading. So you have to be the one that's in between. You have to be able to explain, and you cannot allow a farmer to put his faith in either being able to meet with the local MP or not. And there is this right of information. And what can happen is also that a lobbied person can reject a lobbying contact. That can happen, and that's legitimate. But for example, there is a certain political party here in this house that has the habit of saying we do not speak to lobbyists as a rule, but you see other people coming in through the back door. That's what we're dealing with as well. So what is a legal lobbyist? Someone who's registered, someone who has a contract with their client and can also show this contract, someone who has a mandate for the lobbying activity. That's the gist of it. Thank you, Ms. Barbaric. As we have heard, we are having some difficulties with the very registration of lobbyists, and there's a huge discrepancy between the 83 registered lobbyists and the several thousand lobbyists that are active in the field. So what change do you see necessary here? Will you collaborate with the Association for Legal Lobbying? Because basically a lobbyist should be anyone who spends more than 25% of their activity lobbying. How could this be tackled? Thank you very much. Our commission is a supervisory authority when it comes to the implementation of lobbying provisions, and as such, acts in the interest of ensuring respect for all the relevant provisions, and it monitors how lobbied persons report the lobbying activities and what the lobbyists themselves do. And I can tell you, when it comes to last year, the statistics show that about 4,500 lobbying contacts were reported. Now, our commission receives these records from lobbied persons, so these are public authority holders, and on the other hand, we get the reports from the lobbyists, and we try to pair these two sets of reports to see if things match, to see if those that were lobbied report the same things as the lobbyists. And even there, we sometimes come across mismatches, and this is something that we make public because we want the public to know who met with whom and what subjects were discussed. And one of the deficiencies that we're seeing here is the lack of understanding of what lobbying as such is. When you know that you are being lobbied and that you are obliged to report this to the Commission, we often need to request additional information from the lobbied persons who have registered a contact to even be able to assess whether this was a lobbying contact or not. So raising awareness is the first step to making sure that the legislation is implemented. We mentioned the media. Yes, our Commission also recognizes that the media can contribute to a misunderstanding when it comes to certain institutes. And we address the lobbied persons, but we also address the media. We try to inform the media about the various institutes provided for by the law, and we try to make sure that any information that will be portrayed to the media will be conveyed correctly. And we agree that is the first step, but we would also have to address the lobbyists. We would have to make them aware of their obligations under the current legislation, and but you will always stick to the rules more stringently if you have accepted or adopted the rules yourself. So you really need self-regulation, and we really need reports from lobbyists themselves when it comes to illegal activities. We do get information through various channels, but unless we get a regular report, we cannot expunge anyone from the register. We cannot adopt sanctions. So I think lobbyists themselves can do a lot to improve things, and lobbied persons definitely need to do so, and they're obliged to do so, and we are headed in that way. Well, the professionalization is a way to put everything on a legal path. Now, legal lobbying should be the only lobbying. I think we all agree on that, Dr. Basic. But do you think that the media and media representatives are willing and able to support a regulation of this field? So would they be willing to participate in a prosecution of illegal lobbying that needs to be replaced by legal lobbying? Are they willing to participate? Because they do play a major role in making sure that we all see what happens and that things are done the way they need to be done. Well, I sometimes think that we complicate things that can be resolved very quickly. There's lobbying. I'm not saying there's legal lobbying. There's lobbying. Everything that's not lobbying is corruption. So everything that is not lobbying is illegal and needs to be prosecuted. I know that holders of public office are obliged to report. So why do we not provide them with a simpler instruction that whoever they meet, they need to ask them whether they are registered, whether they have a contract with the client, and whether they have a mandate for their activity. And if they aren't able to provide those documents, then they need to be reported to the Corruption Prevention Commission. Plain and simple. We have a legislation that is as it is, but the reality and the practice is something completely different. So I think any institution that has a supervisory role needs to go a step further. Just having a law is not enough. We need to invest a lot of work into making people aware that any contact with people in power that is not very clear and very transparent is corruptive and needs to be sanctioned. I think someone, Mr. Michael, mentioned that a lot of the activities of the media are also illegal. Yes, I know. I know that we have certain agencies that are in a more favorable position, closer to the court, so to speak. And as the governments change, these agencies change. These agencies get funding outside of any regular channels. So I think the regulation of legal lobbying is just the tip of the iceberg. What is beneath that is much more problematic and much dirtier. Whether the media would support this type of change, I don't know. If the media is acting in the public interest, any type of corruption should be addressed, should be investigated, but I feel that quite often the media do their work, but it's the law enforcement authorities that fail the public later on. Yes, let's leave it at that for now. Unfortunately, we don't hear the speaker without a microphone. Well, it's been determined at the global level that big capital is already present in terms of ownership in the management authorities of the big networks. So big capital wants to make sure that everything is reported in line with their interest. I'm not saying that is all that is happening in Slovenia, but we're not isolated from these tendencies. We have a gentleman from Brussels here. Just have a look at all the big companies whose registered seats are just around the Commission. Everyone is there. When legislation is adopted, for example, the Directive on Audiovisual Media Services, the European Commission publishes everything it has adopted, everything it has reviewed, and you will see that the big media owners hire big lobbying companies, but it's all transparent. You can see what was presented to the Commission, but in Slovenia you have no idea. You have no idea that in the course of the adoption of a law, someone has used their influence, their contacts, has impacted a political party to support a law that is in this person's interest. These may be laws impacting issues that refer to our everyday life, refer to our health, for example. But it's the politics that need to resolve this, and they have to be responsible for this. The responsibility cannot be on the citizens.
We are running out of time, but let's have a last round. We, of course, want to steer this discussion in the positive direction. Mrs. Toplak, I know you started some education programs for the future lobbyists. So where do you think we'll still have some space for maneuver, and what is the vision? For a number of years, I think it's been 10 years that we have included lobbying and good practices in our curriculum. Dr. Ziesel is the lecturer, and it's an elective subject, but students opt for it quite frequently. I think that's not enough. The fact that some people don't even know that there are legal lobbyists, that they cannot make a difference between legal and illegal practices, this is telling me that we would need this sort of education at a very early age if we want to eradicate the corruption. Corruption doesn't have a definition. Lobbying has a definition that everybody understands in their own way. And if you ask people whether your country is corrupt, everybody is going to say yes, although they don't even know what precisely this means. So I think education is very important, and I think it should be part of civic education at a very early age at schools. If this doesn't happen, we should come up with a broader module, maybe a mandatory part of the curriculum for people who work in the public administration. People holding public functions, officials working at ministries should be fully aware of their obligations, and only once they are aware of their obligations would they be willing and capable of reporting their contacts to the Anti-Corruption Commission. So educating people is extremely important. But what we can do as a higher education institution, we can come up with a module within our curriculum, invite the best experts, international experts, and I'm sure that we need to inform the public at large. If you watch the news, you will see every day corruption is mentioned at least 10 times, and people don't even know what precisely corruption is. And this is the only way to eradicate corruption. Mrs. Barbolic, are you going to help? Are you going to participate in changing the registration procedure so that lobbyists will register, so that we start with stratification, and that there will be some sort of incentive for the education of professional lobbyists? Well, thank you for your question. The Corruption Prevention Commission would really like to see the register reflecting the real situation. But we are somewhat limited. If someone does not want to register, they will simply not register. We are also working with lobbied persons who need to know what lobbying is in the first place in order to be able to report to the Commission. And yes, we do have some education modules for public officials. Lobbying is one of the topics that we are addressing in our training courses. We go to ministers' cabinets and present what are the obligations they have. But the Commission would really like to see the legislation being enforced very accurately and consistently. And we would also like to work with the association. But I do hope that on the other side, the lobbyists who are registered and the ones who are not registered but are involved in lobbying, we would like to see them changing their views too, because the Commission is emphasizing and has been emphasizing that lobbying is a completely legal activity, but we would really like not to be left to our own devices. We would like other institutions, not just the association, but others too, working together with us so that we can be heard better. So maybe then more people will be willing to report illegal lobbying, for example. Well, thank you very much. It is time to conclude. Mr. Ziegler, other Western democracies have regulated the lobbying profession. Slovenia still has to improve the situation here so that lobbyists will not be at home just in PR and media agencies. We hope that changes will be made not in 30 years' time, but sooner than that. A lot has been said about professionalization this morning, and more will be said in the future. The Slovene Association for Legal Lobbying is just at the beginning, and it has no intention to stop there. There is an entire team that wants to regulate this unregulated area so that we have the best possible situation in the world. Mr. Ziegler, how are you going to do this? By way of conclusion, what do you have to offer to us so that we can continue on a positive note? Thank you very much. First and foremost, given that we have positive legislation, it is what it is, but this is something we have to live with. So as I said before, we now need to become mature and start honoring the legislation. Our association, working together with the Corruption Prevention Commission, we will together commit ourselves to try and educate people on legal lobbying and illegal lobbying practices. We can come up with a joint educational program, joint curriculum, meaning that if we work together, we can also share the financial burden. And then we should work together with faculties. But we would also like to educate our members and award them with certificates. I'm talking about the National Council, National Assembly, ministries, and also the local level. We are going to target with our education the local communities, because we have seen that at the local level there are hardly any reports of contacts. Mayors seem to be avoiding this in a very efficient way. So we would like to provide this sort of education, not just internally, but also externally. We would like to involve experts from Slovenia and internationally. Slovenia is a young democracy. We would like to follow the example of Western democracy. So we still have a long way to go. As regards our activity in both chambers, we believe that we should also have our place in this chamber. If journalists can have their offices where journalists can follow what is happening, why shouldn't we have dedicated spaces? Lawyers too have offices in the court. Next is accreditation. We are accredited as part of the Corruption Prevention Commission. But if you take a look at the European Parliament or the European Commission, they have accreditations. We would like to see a system of accreditation being set up, and people will be interested in having this accreditation. And this will also be an entry ticket to the register, because people will say, well, I want to have access to education and so on. We will also provide education to all political party groups, ministries, the government, because we want to show all aspects of the story. In Chapter 8, the association is mentioned in the Act, the Code of Ethics, but we are going to go further. If we keep the current chapter in the law, we would like to have dedicated legislation on lobbying. But we believe that this act should be drafted here in the National Council, and this is why we are having this event here in the National Council. So we'll try to involve as many different opinions as possible. As we know, there will be a new parliament, and we will try and submit it for the legislative procedure. The more we organize education, the more we sanction our lobbyists. If somebody is involved in illegal practices, we are going to suggest that they be deleted from the register. We have the Court of Honor within our association, so we are going to go after anybody involved in illegal lobbying practices. And then, as we see that there are more people registered in the register, we hope that there will be more young people, more people entered in the European register, so that Slovenia is not just going to follow others and nod to other people's opinions, but that Slovenia is also going to lobby in its own capacity. Because it's not just the president, it's not just the ambassador, it's not just the minister, but it's also commercial associations, NGOs, and they have every right to go to the European Parliament and express their interest. Same goes for the European Commission. But of course, if you are in the register and you have to say what sort of authority you have, what financial sources we're talking about, and when they ask you, do you have the letter of authority, are you in the register, and if the answer is yes, you have every right to lobby. And indeed, the media have a very important role to play. The media should work with professional lobbyists. Just like you go to the real estate agency if you want to buy a house, here too you need a professional if you want to represent your interests. Thank you very much for your conclusions. I hope this will be a good basis for further development of the Slovenian Association for Legal Lobbying. I would like to thank all the experts this morning, panelists, representatives of institutions, and our viewers at home. I wish lobbying in Slovenia the best of luck.